Welcome to r/Am I the Jerk, where Karen blocks OP's car and really ends up regretting it. Karen blocks my parking spot, gets instant karma. This just happened last week. I had one of those days that started off normal but turned into a full-blown drama. I'm parked in my favorite grocery store's parking lot, Ralph's for my fellow Californians, just about to go in for a quick shop when I spot this lady, we'll call her Karen, pulling into a spot right next to mine. Normally, I wouldn't think twice, but she's driving this massive SUV and she's clearly in a rush. I watch in disbelief as Karen not only takes the spot next to mine, but then starts to ease her SUV over the line into my parking spot. Seriously, her car is halfway into my space. I think, whatever, I'm not going to lose my cool over this, and I just go in to get my shopping done. Fast forward to me finishing my shopping, I come out with my cart full of groceries, and surprise, surprise, Karen is still there. Her SUV is taking up half of my spot, and now she's inside the store. I'm annoyed, but I decide to be the bigger person. I unload my groceries into my car and decide to give Karen a taste of her own medicine. I carefully maneuver my car so that I'm parallel to her SUV, but far enough over that her driver's door will have a hard time opening. I then went back to the entrance to wait and see what happened. When Karen finally comes out, her reaction is priceless. She's tugging at her door, trying to squeeze in. She gets out her phone and starts recording a video, yelling about how rude some people are. Eventually, she got the bright idea to climb in through the passenger side. She's fuming, and it's obvious from the way she's practically peeling out of the parking lot. I'm trying to stay composed, but I can't help the smirk on my face as I watched. I'm not usually one for petty revenge, but seeing her struggle was a nice little payoff for having to deal with her parking job. This is why I park far away from all the other cars. I don't mind getting some exercise. Am I the jerk for asking my husband to cancel his bros-only trip to help me with our newborn after he promised he would? This situation has caused a lot of tension between my husband and I, and now I'm questioning whether I'm being unreasonable. I, 30 female, gave birth to our first baby, Olivia, 2 months ago. Being a first-time mom has been both beautiful and overwhelming. My husband, Jake, who's 32, was incredibly supportive during the pregnancy and promised that after Olivia was born, he would be there for me every step of the way, especially during those challenging first few months. Before Olivia was born, Jake and his friends had been planning a bros-only trip for this summer, a week-long vacation to a cabin in the mountains for hiking, fishing, and bonding. When the trip was being discussed, I reminded Jake that Olivia would only be a few months old and we would be deep in the newborn phase. He reassured me that if things got too tough, he would cancel the trip to help me out, and I trusted him. Now that Olivia is here, things have been harder than I anticipated. Between the sleepless nights, naturally feeding struggles, and just trying to adjust to motherhood, I've been feeling overwhelmed with all of it. Jake has been helpful, but I can tell he's excited about this trip, which is coming up next month. Last week, I asked Jake if he could consider canceling the trip, reminding him of his promise. I told him that I'm struggling, and that having him gone for a whole week would be really tough on me. He seemed surprised and a bit hurt that I was asking him to cancel. He said he's been looking forward to this trip for months and that he needs a break too. He also pointed out that his parents live nearby and could help if I needed support while he was away. I understand that Jake needs a break and wants to spend time with his friends, but I can't help feeling like this is a time when I really need him by my side. I tried to explain that while I appreciate his parents' help, it's not the same as having him here. Jake said that I'm being unfair by asking him to cancel the trip after all the planning that went into it, and that I need to trust him to make sure I'm supported even if he's not physically there. Now we're at a bit of a standoff. Some of my friends think I should let him go, saying that it's important for him to have some time away, especially after all the stress of becoming a new dad. But others agree that it's too soon for him to take off for a week and that he should prioritize being home with me and Olivia. So, am I the jerk for asking my husband to cancel his bros-only trip to help me with our newborn after he promised he would? Edit. A lot of you suggested that I should also take a week off, letting Jake stay with Olivia to get a break for myself. I really appreciate the sentiment behind that suggestion, but there are a couple of reasons why it's not realistic for me right now. First of all, I'm naturally feeding, so being away from Olivia for that long would be really difficult logistically. But beyond that, and this is something I know I need to work on, I just don't feel comfortable being away from my baby yet. I know it's not healthy to feel like I can't have her out of my sight, but I can't help it. I guess it's just that new mom anxiety that's really hard to shake. I've been debating whether or not to show Jake this thread. I'm worried that reading it might hurt his feelings, but I'm definitely going to have another conversation with him about everything. I'm willing to compromise and let him go on the trip, but I think a whole week is just too much. I'm leaning towards suggesting that he limit the trip to a maximum of 3 nights, so he can still have some time away with his friends, but not be gone for an entire week. Update. After putting Olivia to bed, I went straight to bed myself, feeling exhausted. Jake was already asleep, but for some reason, the weight of everything just hit me all at once, and I started crying uncontrollably. My crying woke Jake up, and he immediately asked me what was wrong. I told him that I was just tired, but then I opened up about how anxious I'd been feeling about his trip and being left alone with Olivia. I admitted something I've been reluctant to say out loud, that Jake hasn't been as involved as I thought he would be. This was one of my biggest fears when we found out we were having a baby. For context, Jake has a rocky relationship with his own dad. I won't go into detail about why his dad isn't the best, but his mom, my mother-in-law, remarried when Jake was in middle school, and his dad wasn't very present in his life. Jake has expressed to me before that becoming a father was scary for him because he's afraid of being a bad one, just like his dad was. When he first told me that, I thought it would make him into a great father because it showed how much he cared about being a good dad long before we were even pregnant. When I vented to him about all of this, at first, he tried to defend himself. He admitted that he's been freaking out about having a baby for so long and just didn't want to tell me. He said he didn't want to stress me out while I was pregnant because he knows how much I've always wanted to be a mother. Hearing him say that made me feel guilty, like I hadn't seen how much he's been going through internally. I had tried to convince him that he was going to be a great dad when we had this conversation long ago, and now it all felt more complicated. I thought to myself, this can't go on much longer. I realized that if he was going to keep pulling away like this, I didn't know if I could handle it. So I asked him, is this what our life is going to look like from now on? Me with Olivia and you away? Because if it is, Jake, then I don't think I can continue on like this. Jake told me to calm down and assured me that he wasn't going anywhere. Then he got really emotional. He even started to cry. He said he didn't want to turn into his dad and that he hadn't realized that going on this trip could be a preliminary step towards becoming the absentee father he feared he might be. He apologized for not considering me and Olivia as much as he should have. Long story short, Jake called his friends and told them he wouldn't be able to make the trip. He's even started planning a little family getaway for the 3 of us next year when Olivia is older. It was a tough conversation, but I feel like we're on the same page now, and I'm hopeful that things will get better from here. You were uncomfortable for 9 months. You went through labor. You're now naturally feeding. What the heck does he need a break from? He was a giant jerk when he even planned this trip. He was a bigger jerk when he lied about canceling, and he's a giant jerk now that he thinks it's unreasonable for you not to want him to be gone for an entire week when you're already overwhelmed. It doesn't seem like you'd want his parents to stay for that week while he's gone. This made me furious. I hope this is his only misstep, though I doubt it. Not the jerk. Not the jerk. He agreed he would cancel it until he was actually held to his word. Planning a trip with his friends a few months after your due date was truly spectacularly poor judgment in the first place. He's a dad now. He's not your helper. He should be pulling his own weight, and he should know by now that this is a bad idea. No, his parents living nearby doesn't make up for it, and no, it's not reasonable for him to expect you to trust him to make sure you're supported even though he's not physically there. This is his baby. He should be physically there, not just supporting you, but taking care of his own baby, who I must assume you are still recovering from carrying and giving birth to. You're not being unfair. He's being a liar. What do we call people who say they'll do something and then throw a fit when you expect them to actually do it? Am I the jerk for telling my future in-laws that my decision to change my name is none of their business? I, 22 female, will be getting married next year. I'm taking my fiance's last name, and with changing my last name, I'll also be petitioning the courts to change my first name. This has been a long time coming. My name doesn't hold anything positive for me, and I've been going by my almost name since I was 12, so it made sense to make the change official. I grew up in foster care, and nobody knows if I had a name before. But I was given the name Charlotte by someone involved in my case early on, and that was the name put on my birth certificate. It never really held any meaning to me. Since I was never adopted, I never got named by loving parents either, and the name always just felt wrong, weird, and tied to nothing important. When I met my best friend, she told me I looked like a Kinsey, and I've been a Kinsey ever since. My fiance thinks it's great that I'm making this change, but his parents are opinionated on this. They've asked me before why I would rather be something cutesy like Kinsey instead of mature and pretty like Charlotte, and they told me how complicated it would be to change all of my documents to reflect my new name. They told me Charlotte sounds more like a professional woman, a wife, and a mother than a Kinsey. I showed them that even my work ID has Kinsey on it already because we can use preferred names at my job, but they didn't want to hear it. When they found out I got advice on whether it would be possible to change both names at the same time and obtain the forms, they questioned my motives more and more. They told me Charlotte was lovely and it was their second choice for a girl. My fiancé has told them repeatedly that this is not their decision and it's my name ultimately. He also reminded them that everyone calls me Kinsey already. But this wasn't the end. Then they brought up how names are a gift of love from a parent to their kid. It's a blessing to be named by parents, and they bring up far too often how much time and effort parents put into naming their kids. They know I wasn't named by a parent, that I was named by someone who basically never saw me again. My fiancé told them those comments needed to stop, but last weekend, when some of my fiancé's extended family were at his parents' house and we stopped by, they were talking about it again, and I might have snapped just a little. I told them my decision to change my name is none of their business, and to quit with the insensitive comments about parents naming people because I was named by a random person who was part of my original case. They told me I didn't need to be so rude in their house and that I was acting like they couldn't talk about naming kids without aiming it at me. My fiancé told them that they knew what they were doing and that I wasn't being rude, I was honest, but they said I disrespected them in their own home. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. You tried politely and it didn't work. Your partner tried politely and that didn't work. It's time to be blunt, and if that came across as rude, then in this case, it's totally justified. Also, the hypocrisy of them calling you disrespectful is outstanding. Not the jerk. Pick two more mature sounding names, and every time they bring up the subject, refer to them using those names. As I've told you before, Edith and Eustace, this is a choice that I have made, and I am not soliciting input from you. Am I the jerk for not giving my sister's stepchildren money for college? I, 44 male, have been very fortunate in my life and have enough wealth that I was able to save a very nice amount for my son, who's 19, to pursue the future he wants, while also helping two friends to help pay for their daughter to go to college after some personal and financial issues arose. This is common knowledge to my family, which is why my sister and brother-in-law are now angry with me. My sister and brother-in-law have been married for 6 years, and brother-in-law has 2 kids who are 17 and 16 with his ex. Their mother left them during the divorce, and my brother-in-law has raised them since. My sister and brother-in-law are not as financially secure as I am, and there's not a lot of money for my sister's stepkids to go to college. They brought this topic up during a Sunday dinner with our whole family, minus my sister's stepkids. For those who will ask why my sister's stepkids were not there, it's because they've never liked or accepted my sister or us. And now that they are more independent teens, they refuse to play pretend, to quote them. Even before they reached this stage, they fought my brother-in-law every time they were made to attend anything with us. All throughout dinner, my sister and brother-in-law brought up college, my sister's stepkids, how they were sad they couldn't afford the best for their kids, and that the eldest in particular wasn't going to be able to afford her dream college. When dinner ended and we were all leaving, they approached me and called me greedy for not stepping in to pay for their stepkid's college when I had paid for another kid years ago and my son chose to go into trade school instead of college. I told them those were different circumstances. They said the stepkids are family, while the girl I helped several years ago wasn't. I said she was not family in the traditional sense, but she did consider me an uncle, and we had a close relationship, while my sister's stepkids did not consider me as any kind of family and had made their stances perfectly clear for the last 6 years. My sister and brother-in-law told me I'm the person who clearly doesn't consider them family because I would love them regardless of how they feel if I did, and they said it showed what a truly greedy and selfish person I am. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. I pretty much agree on the outcome, though perhaps not with all of your reasons. What I mean is, right out of the gate, you're not obligated to pay for any nieces or nephews or friends. It's one of those things that's extremely generous, not a requirement. If it were, I'd have a heck of a lot of money from my uncles and aunts. Second, while I don't know your precise financial situation, your sister and brother-in-law seem to think you have infinite money. Maybe you could afford to pay for your stepkids' college, but given you've paid for 2 university educations, that's a pretty serious amount of money. Seems reasonable to me to say, hey folks, this well is pretty low. Please look for another source of funds for a while. The fact they feel entitled to your money is kinda gross. Where we differ a bit is that I don't think particularly poorly of those stepkids, at least not without knowing the circumstances of their lives. I can understand kids not wanting to be shoehorned into this brand new family dynamic. Don't know why their parents broke up, don't know how your sister is as a stepmother. Sure, these kids could be jerks, But as it stands, not wanting to be a part of this new family isn't necessarily a deal breaker. Further, nothing you've said makes me think that these kids are expecting this money. It's just your sister and brother-in-law feeling entitled to it. Not the jerk. My partner won't marry me. How do I accept this and carry on? I don't want to leave. I'm 38 female, and my partner is 39 male. We've been together for about 8 years. We have 2 kids, one who's 4 and one who's 11. 2 years ago, he told me he would never marry. I'm still struggling with this, and I've become very sad about it at times. It was a shock to me. When we got together, he painted a pretty picture about the proposal he felt I deserved, even mentioning a location. Now, okay, I should have chased this up with, "So, you want to marry me?" But I didn't. I still feel justified in assuming that conversation meant he wasn't against marriage. His reasons? Marriage is outdated. It's archaic. There's no point to it. He's totally against the institution of marriage. Everyone gets divorced. These are direct quotes. My reasons for it. I love him very much. I want to call him my husband and to be his wife. I want a solidified union of family. I want us all to have the same name. Romantically, I want him to choose me in that recognized way. There are also practical reasons, but we've solved some of these as far as possible with a will, at my insistence, since finding this out. We jointly own our home. I've offered a civil partnership instead. No. A humanist ceremony. Also no. I asked if we could get rings as a sign of our own personal commitment to one another and say a few private words, just the 2 of us in the garden, and pop them on our wedding fingers. No. He will wear a ring on the other hand with no words between us, so that's what we both do. I wear mine on my left, but eventually felt ridiculous as he wouldn't, so I switched it to the right hand like him. We had a big discussion about it, and I asked, "Would you be willing to lose me over this?" He said, "You would be choosing to throw everything away, so yes." So to the question, I do not want to leave him. I love him very much. I have no interest in or ability to change his mind. How do I manage my sadness about this? This discussion was 2 years ago, and I can't reach acceptance within myself, but I really want to. I really want to accept and be fine with it. Help! How? I can't afford therapy. Thanks. Edit. Just to answer some common questions I've seen, I fully believe he has the right to not want to marry. I'm finding it hard to find my own peace though. I'm not interested in a party, a dress, or a big ceremony. I've suggested tons of compromises. Also, the eldest is not his. No. I have been married once and divorced young. My youngest will be 5 soon, so we had him about 3 years into the relationship. I'm the biggest earner. I co-own the house fully. We've made wills to try to protect us legally without marriage, but in this country, you can't replicate the protections of marriage. There is no common law type deal. I was in a similar situation a long time ago, so let me just tell you how it played out for me. We were together for 5 years, and I desperately wanted to marry him for the same reasons you mentioned. I wanted him to publicly choose me. I felt stupid calling him my boyfriend like we were teenagers. We kept having the same arguments you do, and I just felt so sad inside, like I wasn't good enough and he didn't love me enough to just say yes. In the end, his family talked him into it. He didn't really propose, just said, "I think we should do it next summer." Didn't get me a ring either, because I had already said yes. I started planning the wedding and he trudged along, but it was such a hollow victory because his heart wasn't even in it. He just did it because he had been convinced to, and that made me even more sad, and in the end, I broke it off. He was relieved. All that was 15 years ago. He's married now and they have kids, and by all accounts, he didn't need anyone to talk him into it this time. Honestly, you can't win here. Even if you plead and beg and argue enough to get him to marry you, it won't be what you want and deserve. Someone who wholeheartedly wants to declare to the world, "This is my wife and partner." I'm so sorry for you. It's quite simple. You gave him the whole package and now he doesn't see the benefit of marriage. If you had set a boundary, like no moving in or no having kids before marriage, you would have a ring on your finger. We as women need to set firmer boundaries around the things that we desire. If we do these things for free, then why would he invest in a ring? Think about it from his point of view. There's literally no benefit to him now. My Karen in-laws are demanding I have more kids even though I don't want to. My husband and I have a 4-year-old daughter together. She is our one and only, and I was done after her. I got sterilized earlier to prevent falling pregnant again. My in-laws are unhappy about this because my husband is their only kid. They've said I was too rash in making the decision because I'm young, 30, and that I should think about my daughter and them and how a bigger family is always better when you have the choice. They told me it was unfair, that I was wrong. They deserve more grandkids. That was when I told them what I did. For context, our daughter was a much wanted and very planned baby, but the first 18 months of her life were the worst of mine. She was diagnosed as being a high-needs baby, and that is underplaying it. She never stopped crying, and there was no clear cause. We were in and out of the ER with her. We never got a break because nobody could stand to babysit her for us with the crying. My in-laws were around, and they would leave because it bothered them so much to hear her cry like that. A few times they would tell me to stress less, but I couldn't leave the house with her without getting looks or comments from strangers. We were spending so much money taking her to the hospital and the doctor to try to figure out what was wrong. We paid for tests, we paid for all kinds of different formulas and other things suggested. It was exhausting. It got so bad, my husband lost his job because he was showing up to work exhausted and unable to function. I was unable to function. I would hear her cries in my sleep, and I ended up needing therapy because for another year I would fall asleep and wake up in tears because it still haunted me. We're not sure how or why it stopped, but thank goodness it did because I was hanging on by a thread. After our daughter though, I could not stand the thought of experiencing that again. Nobody could tell us what it was, why it happened, just that there are documented cases of some babies like that. It's not a comfort to me or us. My in-laws do not go after my husband like this, I guess because he's not the one who got sterilized himself. But I said what I did because it's true. They were no help to us, and they don't owe us that. But with them demanding more grandkids from me, they should be willing to face up to the fact that they were no help when we needed it the most. They're mad. My husband told them I was right, but they claim I had no right to say that to them. I never normally would have, which is making me doubt myself. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. If they wanted more grandkids, they should have had more kids. Your decision to have kids is between you and your husband. They are your husband's parents, and therefore he should be intervening and telling them to quit their crap. The more complaining they do towards you is merely building a wall between you and them brick by brick. Not the jerk. Even if your kid was a perfect sleeper and uber calm, you don't owe them more grandkids. Your daughter was a difficult baby, and no one in the family wanted to support you to the point of people losing their jobs. That's a nightmare. They probably only want more grandbabies because they missed out, with your first daughter being a crier. Am I the jerk for buying personalized school supplies for my daughter so it can't be redistributed in class? My daughter, Mia, who's 9, has started a new school recently. We moved recently and she had to start a new school. I got a list of supplies that the teacher required, plus extras like extra packs of crayons, etc. You know the deal. While I don't necessarily agree with this, it's not a hill that I was willing to die on, so I got everything on that list. However, I also got my kid her own supplies. Now, the list didn't say to not label them. Mia is very particular on what type of stationery she likes. I've heard horror stories of kids' stuff being redistributed and them ending up with crappy supplies. So I sat down with Mia and we got her personalized binders and notebooks and pencils with her name on Etsy. It's all part of the item, so it can't be removed and given to another kid. Like I said, as requested, I bought extra binders, etc. It turns out that I was right to do so. When Mia got home, she brought a passive-aggressive note from the teacher about Mia's supplies. Apparently, she tried to gather all supplies and have kids pick another one. She requested that I switch Mia's supplies to generic ones, which I'm refusing to do. The teacher now requested that I stop by to have a chat regarding Mia's supplies. I posted in a local Facebook group, and parents are divided, so I need another opinion before I go meet with Mia's teacher. Am I the jerk for buying my kid personalized stationery so it cannot be taken away from her? You're the jerk. Part of this is learning to share. I know I'll get fried for this. Not all kids have it equal. I'm one of the rich. I'm not, but relatively speaking, parents in a very poor New York City school. Everything I buy is for everyone, and I buy extra. This is my way of thinking as a whole, and I want my kid to think this way too. Extend this also to education, healthcare, love, anything. If more tax money was allotted to education, this would be a non-issue. I also slipped the teachers extra cash for the book fair and let me know if any kids need money for a field trip. It's so simple. Karen's sister-in-law gets banned from our Thanksgiving this year. My mother-in-law and I do not get along, but I'm really proud to say we called a ceasefire for the sake of my husband. I know this might sound childish, but it took blood, sweat, and tears for us to even be in the same room. Mother-in-law did some awful things to me, and it took work to forgive her. I did some things I'm not proud of, but at some point I realized I was just hurting my husband. Mother-in-law was an absolute monster at our wedding. She made planning a nightmare. She embarrassed me at my bridal shower, and she wore something that could have passed for a wedding gown. Right after the wedding, we had a financial setback and had to stay with mother-in-law. I know this is petty and not defending it, but I was still upset about the wedding. Mother-in-law was having some guy over and demanded we hide ourselves away. She really liked this guy, cooked a fancy dinner, and spent like an hour getting dressed. So I messed with the dinner she cooked and poured flour on her when the doorbell rang. Again, I'm not defending it right now, but we were in this awful war mindset. Yeah, mother-in-law kicked us out of the house for that stunt, and eventually I grew up and reached out to make peace. That was 2 years ago, and mother-in-law is still with him, and they're getting married in January. I've apologized to her. She's never going to apologize to me, but we've made our peace. We bought our first house recently and had a large dinner party. Also, I'm hosting Thanksgiving this year. Mother-in-law said I can have it because it's the worst holiday, but hey, it's a start. Everyone knows how excited I am about finally having a house to host in. At the dinner party, mother-in-law was getting a lot of attention for being engaged and people wanting wedding details, and sister-in-law decided to give a toast about how she knew her future stepfather was the right guy because he stuck around after that incident, and she told everyone about it in detail. And he calmed mother-in-law down and made her dinner while she washed the flour off. I get sister-in-law's point, but it was humiliating. Also, it paints an unfair picture because she left out all the crap mother-in-law has done to me. Most of my guests were horrified. This was supposed to be a nice adult evening, and she's bringing up how immature I was right out of college. Mother-in-law laughed. Father-in-law laughed because he is her ex and loves the flower story, but everyone else was in shock, and it made the vibe really weird. I called sister-in-law out after the party, and she laughed and said it was a funny story. I told her it was humiliating, and she said, well, it was true. I said, as of right now, she's banned from the house because she disrespected me in my own house. This means Thanksgiving since it's coming up. Mother-in-law asked me to reconsider because, well, you did do that, and because sister-in-law doesn't have anyone else to spend Thanksgiving with. I stood firm, and now mother-in-law is saying she will stay home and cook for sister-in-law. My husband is mad at his mom for picking sister-in-law, but said he will back me. Sister-in-law swears she was just kidding and I'm overreacting. You're the jerk. If you want things to change, big if, you're going to have to get on the high road and stay there no matter what the provocation. If you do that long enough, either they'll stop provoking you or you'll stop minding. A win for you no matter what. For me, when I feel righteous indignation, it's a red flag that I'm about to make a childish mistake. It's easier to take the high road if I stay off my high horse. You're the jerk. You sound mean. You did a thing that obviously everyone knows about, but you obviously aren't over it and are somehow using that to exclude your sister-in-law from a family gathering? Also, regardless of the rift between you and mother-in-law, you were living under her roof and tried to sabotage a date that turned into a lifelong relationship? Come on. Grow up and get some perspective. You're just asking for future wars with that attitude. Everyone sucks here, but in degrees. Regardless of what mother-in-law did, your behavior was extremely childish. You poured flour on her because of her wedding behavior when she was putting a roof over your head? You were lucky she didn't grab something and defend herself. Frankly, that they could turn it into a funny story and laugh about it is a good thing. Instead, they could still be telling people what an awful jerk your husband married. It's embarrassing, yes, and sister-in-law was not thoughtful to repeat it, but banning her from the holiday table was overdoing it. Of course mom is going to celebrate the holiday with her daughter since you banned her. Your husband shouldn't be surprised, neither should you. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or sister-in-law? Please let us know. If y'all had a reality show, I would totally watch it. Am I the jerk for deliberately ruining my friend's surprise birthday party? My friend Kate's 25th birthday party was last week, and a few weeks earlier, her boyfriend Rob contacted me to help him plan a surprise party for her. Basically, the plan was for me to drive her to the city so we could have a lunch to celebrate together, just the two of us, because some of our other friends and Rob wouldn't be free that day. Except they actually were all free and would be waiting there for us, and he'd rented out and decorated a private room in a restaurant. Essentially, I just needed not to divulge the truth, which I had no problem doing until the day of, when we were driving down together. Kate suddenly got very melancholy and said how she doesn't think Rob cares for her. They've been dating 4 years. He can't even take off work for her birthday, and he probably hasn't planned anything at all. She was really starting to work herself up and even began crying. I came clean and told Kate what was going on and asked her to pretend to be surprised for everyone's benefit. She cheered up considerably in the moment and thanked me for reassuring her, but she's not a great actor, so when the moment came, she didn't act surprised and then let slip that I'd told her beforehand. Rob is now pretty mad at me for ruining the surprise and says I should have found a different way to reassure her that he and our friends still care for her. Our mutual friends are divided on this. Kate isn't mad, but did mention it was a shame that the surprise aspect was ruined. I honestly don't think I'm the jerk here, but will accept others' input. Edit. Dang, y'all are just as divided as my friend group. The not the jerks seem to be coming from people who hate surprise parties for themselves, of which I am one personally, so maybe that's where my knee-jerk response came from. Not the jerk. You had a crying friend on the verge of a breakdown, believing that nobody liked her and that her birthday was forgotten. That must have been an uncomfortable sight, and you told her about the surprise to cheer her up. There was nothing malicious in your actions, and you were put on the spot. I'm sure everyone will say you ruined the surprise and you should have done X or Y, but hindsight is 20/20. You had to make a judgment call, and whilst it may not have been the right one, it at least reassured your friend she was loved and she didn't need to work herself up. Edit. Another point I'd like to bring up is OP was driving at the time. To all the people who are saying she should have said X, Y, and Z, maybe the reason OP didn't have time to think of an excuse was because she was on the road and perhaps mostly concentrating on her driving. You're the jerk. Count me in as a person who hates actively trying to make someone feel unscared in order to make a surprise more impactful. I would not be happy if I was throwing a surprise party. That being said, it seems like Kate was okay with her boyfriend's surprise. It also seems like she would have been comforted by you simply saying, "I'm sure Rob has planned something special. He really cares about you." So because your reaction seems more about how you would have felt in Kate's shoes instead of what would have actually worked best for Kate, you're the jerk. Even though I agree with you about surprises, there were many ways to comfort her without spoiling things. Not the jerk. Why is it so many people value the boyfriend's achievement of surprise higher than the emotional comfort of the girlfriend? That being said, I'm sure there would have been better ways to comfort her, like someone suggested. Tell her that boyfriend was working on something for some other time or whatever. But as you can see, even though I have all the time in the world to come up with a different scenario, or 2 or 3, they all escape me. I can imagine that you must have been under quite some more stress being in that situation. So yes, despite there being better options, I'll give you a pass for that. What do you think? Is OP a jerk for ruining the surprise party or not? Please let us know. Her heart was in the right place. I don't think she's a jerk. Just a surprise party ruiner, that's all. Am I the jerk for calling my wife selfish for refusing to come to my sister's wedding out of jealousy? When I met my wife, my family, not this specific sister, were jerks to her. My mom found her annoying and said she shouldn't have to interact at all. And when I didn't let that fly, she was very rude to my girlfriend. My younger sister said I was ruining our family and became very aggressive. I had to cut them out of my life, which was the hardest thing I've ever done. I still have a hard time thinking about that. I can just never speak to my mom again. But I knew that was what I had to do to be a good husband. My middle sister was never really involved. When I cut my mom out, my younger sister cut me out, and my middle sister, Jane, said she would stand by me, though she thought I should fix things with our mom. My wife and I have 2 beautiful kids, and Jane is the only one in the family who has ever met them, and really the only person I have left from my family of origin. My mom wasn't at my wedding. I've never met her husband, never met my niece from my other sister, and it still makes me sad. Due to the issues with my mom, my wife and I had a tiny wedding. It was just the courthouse and a few friends. I know that wasn't her childhood dream. She's totally the princess type who had been dreaming about a wedding since she was a child. My mom had always said she would pay for mine, but obviously didn't. My mom got married a year after I did, and I found my wife creeping on her social media and looking at the pictures and crying. I comforted her the best I could, but she was very upset that my mom didn't deserve it and that she would never get the chance to have her own wedding. Now, Jane is getting married and my mom is paying for everything. My mom has a lot of money, and I know Jane's wedding is going to be over the top. I'm going to be walking Jane down the aisle. My mom and other sister will be there, but we've seen them plenty of times during the no contact, and it has never been an issue. Neither are interested in resuming contact, and they stay away from us. My wife said her issue is completely about how much it hurts to see Jane get the wedding she didn't get, and she said she isn't going to come with me because it will hurt too badly. I asked her to reconsider because I'll feel awkward being there on my own, and Jane is the only family I have left. My wife said she's sorry, but it just hurts too much to see someone else have a big wedding. Since our wedding, she has avoided others and declined being a bridesmaid a couple years ago because she said she couldn't get childcare, which wasn't true, and she knew I could get those days off work. I called her selfish for not coming to Jane's wedding and said I feel that she doesn't care about me and cares more about a party. My wife was absolutely devastated and said I invalidated her feelings, and I didn't try to understand. Things have been awkward for the past 2 days over what I said. Not the jerk. Honestly, from reading all that, I see why your mom and other sister don't like her. Stalking your mom's social media and crying over her wedding photos? Refusing to go to your middle sister's wedding because she didn't get the dream wedding she wanted? I'm sorry, but your wife is way too hung up on this wedding she never had, which I get, but at the same time, she's letting that influence how she treats the sister that didn't do anything to her, and that's not right. Not the jerk. A wedding is a significant milestone in Jane's life, and she deserves to celebrate it with her family, including her sister-in-law, your wife. There's no reason why your wife won't come to her wedding besides her jealousy. She's jealous and insecure and is willing to compromise your and her relationship with Jane because she can't control her intense jealousy. Jane will know she didn't come to the wedding because she didn't want to and not because she couldn't. It's utterly transparent. You can definitely get a babysitter for your kids months in advance. Expecting her to believe it is just assuming she's ignorant. There's no excuse to circumvent the wedding invitation. People do above and beyond to show up to their family's weddings. It's a minor effort to arrange things such as time off of work or childcare for the kids during this time. The spying on others and then gossiping about them is petty as well. Jane was the only one supporting her, and she's reciprocating her this way out of sheer selfishness and envy. She's an ingrate, and she demonstrates a complete lack of consideration, gratitude, and goodwill. Let's put all the unkindness towards your wife to the side for one moment and talk about her wedding. Why did you guys have a small wedding? Were you both always counting on your mother's money to fund your wedding? When I was married, none of the parents paid for anything, and we had an awesome wedding. I don't see why your family had anything whatsoever to do with what kind of wedding you had. Is she just upset that she didn't get the money from her mother-in-law that she had hoped for? It seems a very strange thing to rely on. What am I missing? Well, who do you think is acting like the jerk? OP or his wife? Please let us know. I'm worried for her, to be honest. That level of jealousy towards someone who's done nothing to her seems it could be a bit unhealthy. Hurry up and keep changing your tire. Okay. This was many years ago, but it sticks in my mind to this day. I was a contracted service provider, tow truck driver, for a major roadside assistance/travel organization, though the company I worked for was quite small. I had been sent to a lakeside neighborhood in my popular Northwest city, a neighborhood full of hip restaurants and cutesy boutiques, to change a tire on a new BMW. This was back when all cars had a spare tire, which should tell you how long ago this was. I had my own tools, but for the new BMWs, it was always recommended to use the tools that came with the car, since they were less likely to cause damage. I had no problem with that, since the jack that came with the car was quite easy to use. It had a crank instead of a jack handle. The only issue was that there needed to be enough clearance between the jack and nearby immovable objects, such as, say, a curb. This particular vehicle was parked very close to the curb. My normal SOP is to ask the customer to slowly move the car away from the curb to avoid damage to the rim of the flat tire. No one has an issue with this, normally. The chucklehead owner of the vehicle refused to move it, claiming that it was going to ruin the tire. I told him that if he moved it slowly, it wouldn't damage anything. He wasn't buying it. I pointed out that the tire was already flat and likely needed to be replaced anyway, so no problem. He screeched at me, telling me to get on with it and change the tire because he had places to be. So I got to it, wanting to be clear of this chump as quickly as possible. This car's jack had a very low gear ratio, requiring several turns to lift the car even an inch. but the force required to turn the crank was not excessive, enabling the user to quickly turn the crank until the car was raised sufficiently. The issue with the car being too close to the curb is that while the jack's crank has a hinge to fold it compactly when stored, the crank must be unfolded completely to provide adequate leverage to turn and lift the car. But with it so close to the curb, the bottom of the arc of the crank's movement caused the handle to just barely clear the curb. Only problem was that I was holding the crank as it came around to the curb. Not enough room between the crank handle and the curb for my fat fingers. Yes, as a matter of fact, I did skin 2 knuckles down to the bone, with the scars still present to this day. And yes, I did use some colorful, unprofessional language. Captain Chucklehead heard this and smugly announced that he was going to report my horrifying language and get me fired. He then reiterated his desire for me to get the lead out and finish changing the tire. Oh, really? See, my first aid kit was back in the truck, several dozen yards away. Well, since I didn't want to delay this person's day any longer than absolutely necessary, I just continued to change the tire, splattering crimson jewels of blood on the rim of the flat, on the spare, on the jack, on the lug wrench, on the fender. I made sure not to waste a single cell on the ground. I even managed to get a nice fat drippy drop on the window. His face went pale as he saw the biohazard scene unfolding all over his precious car. I even made him sign the form with a blood-smeared pen, though I gave him the opportunity to get his own. After he nearly caused an accident leaving the parking space, probably on his way to the car wash, I was then able to tend to my poor knuckles and get ready for whatever else the day would bring. Never heard a single squawk from my boss or from corporate. Forget that guy. Am I the jerk for refusing to testify for my dad in court? My mom and dad split up when my brother, 24 male, and I, 25 female, were very young. Since then, Dad has brought home lots of girlfriends who do not last long. We have a half-sister, Diana, who's 10, born in 2011. My dad and her mom share custody. In 2019, his girlfriend at the time, Laura, who was told she was infertile and was 40, got pregnant. She told my dad the baby was a miracle and she was going to keep him. My dad was very clear from the start that he's not happy with having another kid, that it's Laura's project and that he feels too old, 58, to have a new baby. Laura told him he could have the part he wanted in the baby's life. My half-brother, Leo, was born a year and a half ago. He's very cute and happy. My dad was proud when he was born, showing pictures to everyone and all. For around 8 to 10 months, Laura and Leo lived at my dad's. However, whenever I would call him at that time and ask, "How are you?" he would reply angrily that he was obviously not well, having been trapped into having a new baby that he did not want, that he was deprived of his freedom, and is overall upset with having to take care of 2 kids, Diana and Leo. He would openly say that in front of Diana and Leo. He began treating Laura worse and worse, and just leaving all the time during the weeks or weekends, so Laura would have to take care of Leo and Diana. She has health problems and had 2 heart attacks during that time, so he reluctantly took care of my siblings when she was recovering, but she still did the cooking, dishes, and stuff. After that time, Laura and Dad talked things through, and Laura decides it's best if she moves out to another city, a city where my dad goes vacationing a lot because he has a boat there, where she can get her own apartment, she has her own job, and so that Dad can come see her and Leo when he feels like it, without feeling trapped. He agrees and she moves, starts building a good life for her and Leo, subscribes to a sports club, meets new friends, Leo is at childcare near home, etc. Laura keeps in touch with the whole family and we're welcome to stay at hers anytime. Fast forward a few weeks and my dad is telling everyone she's a horrible monster for taking Leo away from his dad and siblings. He would go to the city she's at, randomly, ask to see Leo and bring him back to his house in another city for a few days. Laura does not know when she's seeing Leo again. When she refused to let him see Leo for a few days, 18 days, because she can't stand the uncertainty and needs my dad to respect his schedule, he has gone to Leo's daycare, taken Leo, and just left without her knowing. Laura has filed a lawsuit against him to obtain full custody, and my dad would have the right to visit Leo on the weekends and vacation under a fixed schedule. My dad wants me to testify for him in court, but in my opinion, he brought this on himself. I refuse to testify for him, and he now refuses to talk to me. Am I the jerk? Edit. Thank you all so much for your comments, inputs, and for sharing your personal stories. I feel very relieved that the consensus is that I'm not the jerk. In fact, my dad is. I'll put into practice all the very good advice I've gotten on how to handle my relationship with him, or lack thereof, and with my siblings. My dad has also asked my brother, 24, male, to testify for him, and my brother has told me he doesn't know what to do. I don't know if I'll show him this thread, but I sure have a lot of arguments now to convince him not to testify. Not the jerk. You should absolutely testify, just not on his behalf. What your dad is doing is wrong, and I hope Laura is successful in protecting her son from him. Does Diana's mother know that your father badmouths his daughter in front of her? Because I also want Diana protected from him. OP. Yes, she does. I think he asked her to testify as well, and she also refused for the moment. She does not want to get involved, as to not jeopardize the relationship she has with him and not affect Diana too much. As for testifying against him, I have considered it. If Laura is not successful and the matter goes to higher courts, I just don't want to get involved if I can avoid it. I don't want my dad to never talk to me again. Edit. I should add that I am not from the US, so the US legal system does not apply here. In my country, I will be able to give a new testimony before the Court of Appeal in a custody case. I'm in the legal field, so can vouch for this. I will also triple check with Laura's lawyer when I get to speak to her. Ever serve someone you think was trying to provoke a confrontation by not tipping? Had a guy with a $43 tab, sirloin and a lemonade, pay with $43 cash. From his manner, with the first thing he said to me, I knew it was going to be a stiff, but he still got the best service I can give with 8 tables active at dinner. Any delay that occurred was due to our kitchen being understaffed and overwhelmed. Rang his stuff in within 15 seconds of him ordering, and homie got his food immediately after it popped in the window. After dude paid and I counted the cash and closed the check, I could almost feel him trying to gauge my reaction, and it might be in my head, but I swear he wanted me to say something to him so he could do a little bit about entitlement or something. I don't know. Like, it cost me a couple bucks to serve him, but whatever. Like, seriously? I don't really give a hoot about 10 bucks one way or the other anymore, but it did make me wonder if this is something other servers or bar have felt before. Usually a stiff is just that, but I swear it had some kind of experimental vibe, or maybe the dude was trying to make a TikTok, or maybe I'm a narcissist with main character syndrome. But still, anyone else where it walked like a duck and quacked like a duck, but it was a goose egg? Update. So my guy came back in tonight. I think he was maybe kind of surprised since I was bar last night and main dining room tonight. I decided again against making it an issue and gave him the most aggressively good service I could manage. Had his iced tea and bread within 45 seconds of taking his drink order, had the calamari out about 2.5 minutes after that, entree out the second it hit the window, check already ready in hand when he asked for it with half of his entree left to eat. Wished him very enthusiastically a fantastic evening. He left 20 on 55. I'm still not certain if it was to balance out last night or if it was some sort of test that I had passed or what. Regardless, it helped balance out the couple inevitable rough Sunday night tables. Reply. Absolutely. I had a guy literally ask me if I wanted to know why he didn't tip me. I knew that he got excellent service and there was nothing wrong with his experience, so I simply said, nope, tipping is optional. So he asked me again if I wanted to know. I said, nope, tipping is optional and it's your right to choose not to tip. He asked me a third time if I wanted to know why he didn't leave a tip, and I have to endure his ridiculous ego because he's asking me this while using our handheld debit machines, so I can't easily exit the situation. I need to wait for his transaction to process. Finally, when his transaction was complete, I say for the last time, nope, tipping is optional and you have a great day, and finally escape. Thankfully, one of my other tables overheard the whole thing and expressed their disgust with his behavior and left me a generous tip to make up for his jerkness. Reply. I had a seemingly lovely group of women in their 30s and they were flirting and joking with me the whole time. Then the check came and it was $79, so they gave me $80. So I said, I'll be right back with your change, to which one of them said, oh, you better, as they all laughed. I get back and hand them the dollar and some change, and they asked, so, you have to tip out at the end of the night, right? How much is it? Typically, it's 3% of my total sales. So, you're paying a couple bucks to serve us? That sucks. They all laughed and left the restaurant. Am I the jerk for refusing to take my name off the deed to my mother-in-law's home? Me and my partner have been together for 8 years, married for 2 of them. 5 years ago, we bought a home together, a small 2-bedroom unit, just to see if we could coexist without ending one another, with the intention of only staying a few years before we got married and then upgraded to something larger. 3 years on, we had enough of a deposit to do just that when my partner's mother came to us asking for help. She wanted to buy a place but didn't have anything in the way of savings. She was tired of renting as it was becoming more and more expensive. We talked about the issue, knowing that if we agreed to help, it meant delaying our own upgrade by a further 3 years at minimum. With some hesitation on our part, we nevertheless did the right thing and helped out his mother by giving her $90,000, the sum total of all of our savings at the time, making it clear it was just a loan, and she bought a place also with the aid of her other son. Recently, my partner has been talking to me about getting my name taken off the documentation to the house, so it is only her name and her 2 sons on all the paperwork. I know his mother has been in his ear about it because he only ever brings it up after a solo visit to her. For a while, I avoided the conversation, but recently my husband has had an actual conversation with a lawyer to draw up paperwork to have my name legally removed. When I found out, I told my husband we needed to have a serious talk, and I told him honestly that I would not remove my name from the documentation because, to date, his mother has not paid either of us back a single cent of the money we lent her. This angered my husband, who said I had agreed to take my name off the documentation. That's why he spoke to a lawyer in the first place. When I insisted I never agreed and that I was just protecting us both by insisting our names stay on all the documentation, he called me paranoid that his mother would never cheat us. Now I feel guilty. Am I the jerk for refusing to remove my name from the documentation, seeing as I did help pay for the place she bought? And without our help, she would still be stuck renting. Not the jerk. Your mother-in-law has already cheated the 2 of you by not paying back the $90,000 you lent her. I wouldn't take my name off a single thing until every dollar loaned was repaid, in full. Not payments that can be dragged out over years or forgotten about. If this isn't acceptable, then you might want to suggest they sell the house and pay you back what is owed. Not the jerk. And your husband tried to gaslight you. I would talk to a lawyer of my own, and it's time to start demanding the money mother-in-law owes to start being repaid. You were incredibly generous, but now you need to ensure you won't be ripped off. Why is he wanting your name off? His calling you paranoid is unacceptable. If anything, you need to check that he has not forgiven the loan behind your back and that its existence is legally binding. Please report back. To be honest, I would be going for a lawyer and a trial separation in your place. Never lend money to family. Don't call ladies girls. That's what somebody wrote on the receipt of their 10% tip. I, 24 male, served a group of 7 ladies that came in for lunch. They were all approximately late 30s. We had 2 servers on, and it was pretty busy lunch rush. On top of a few inside and outside tables, I had a party of 12 I was finishing when they said, and they were arriving little by little. When they all arrive, I say, "Hey, did you girls need a few minutes? Or could I grab anything?" One of them volunteered to start, went around and got the whole order. Everyone was nice, polite, totally perfect. We have a 2-course lunch meal, appetizer and an entree. Of course, when it's busy, the food will take a bit longer considering the kitchen has to wait for our fire tickets. I get their apps out, and for bigger tables during lunch, I always fire them immediately, especially this time since the kitchen's busy. I also must add, at this point, they're one of the 2 tables sitting outside in the 40-degree weather. We still had plenty of room inside. I'm busy inside at a computer, and one lady approaches me and says they need their entrees now since they need to get back to a meeting. Mind you, they said nothing about being in a rush the 6+ times I've been at the table already. Nonetheless, when they ordered, I say they'll be a few minutes, and I literally told her I didn't know her group was in a rush. I don't assume that of any table unless they tell me they're on a time frame. Why not just get fast food? A few minutes later, I'm running the food out, and the same lady meets me halfway and says they want it all to go, and the check. I get that, but of course, I sorta just negotiated with her and dropped the food to the table and gave them boxes. They paid and left. On the bottom of the receipt it read, "Stop calling ladies girls." Reply: many moons ago, my week-long training before they opened a new Olive Garden in my town included a portion on using language like this. Using anything which could be misinterpreted was highly discouraged, especially guys. Using folks and y'all seems to be the most neutral, and I've never gotten myself in trouble since switching to those 2. Likewise, we were trained to never say no problem, because it's no and problem. That one I've actually taken to heart. Even in casual conversation, I now say things like, happy to, or my pleasure, and I've actually been complimented on being so positive all the time. It's fake positivity, mind you, but it seems to work. Karen wife demands my son's college fund. I've been married to my wife for 3 years. I have a 16-year-old son from my previous marriage, and his grandparents and I are on good terms. We've set up a joint account to contribute towards his college fund. The problem started when my wife requested that I pull money from my son's college fund to pay for a C-section in a private hospital. I declined her request and refused to even negotiate. She complained about how I didn't seem to care about her or our son's well-being, even though there was nothing to worry about in terms of health. Yes, every medical procedure has its own risks, but the local free hospitals we have are decent and offer great care. All family members and friends had their kids there. She disagreed and criticized the poor service local hospitals have and insisted that this was a big deal since it concerned both her and our son's health. I tried assuring her, saying she will be fine, but she argued that I have no idea what it's like and told me if I refuse to put money towards the CSE, then I shouldn't be surprised when she puts her maiden name on our son's birth certificate instead of my family's name. I refused as I saw no need to waste money on private hospitals when we had free service and care available. She stopped bringing it up, and days later she had a scheduled CS at the local hospital, and I wasn't allowed to be at the hospital, and I respected her wish. I only saw my son when she came home, and I was shocked to learn she went ahead and put her maiden name on the birth certificate. I immediately went off on her, but she said I caused this and claimed I was obviously favoring my oldest over my youngest before he was even born. I said she was dead wrong and called her petty and vengeful for doing this purely to punish me solely for the fact that I was unable to afford a private hospital. Her family watched and she told me to step out of the room, but I said we weren't finished talking. She started crying and her mom got involved and told me to step out because I was stressing her daughter out. I had an argument with her too and asked if she approves of any part of her daughter's behavior, and she just shook her head, telling me to calm down and give her some time to rest. She said no, but I bear blame too for disregarding my wife's needs after she made them clear and pointed out that pulling some money for the private hospital wouldn't hurt. But my parents disagreed and are upset and refusing to even visit, calling my wife unhinged and toxic. Not the jerk. Your wife sounds petty and exhausting. I get that pregnancy is stressful, but that's no excuse for acting maliciously. She has no right to dictate what to do with the money you put aside for your teenage son. The baby she had is yours too, so her decision to give him only her name was nothing but spiteful. Not the jerk. If your wife wanted to give birth in a private hospital, she should have made that clear from the start so that you could both save up for it. Deciding last minute that you need to steal from your kid's college fund is absolutely ridiculous and entitled. Getting revenge by not allowing you into the delivery room, not allowing you to meet your kid until she came home, and giving him her maiden name is absolutely shocking. There are so many red flags. She is incredibly toxic. Has she always been like this? What's her relationship with a stepson like? You're the jerk. Wow, I guess I'm the only one here, so bring on the downvotes. Your wife is about to give birth to her first kid. She's worried that the quality of healthcare that she will receive in this incredibly painful and vulnerable moment in her life is not good enough. Instead of taking her seriously, trying to understand why she's concerned, and potentially brainstorming for other ways to get the money to pay for the treatment, you laugh in her face and tell her she should be fine with the free stuff. Sure, easy for you to say, as it's not your body that will potentially burst open, and then get upset the kid doesn't get your last name like it's 1950. You're a huge jerk, and I hope she divorces you. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his wife? Please let us know. Stealing the stepson's college fund is just sick. I'd kick Karen out is what I'd do. Am I the jerk for not letting my daughter go to her homecoming dance? My daughter is 14 and a freshman in high school. She came home one day after being at her mother's for a week. We split custody and wrote homecoming on our calendar and starts talking about all the plans she's made with her best friend to go to homecoming together. Homecoming week happened to fall on a week she was with me. She starts raving to my wife and I about the dress her mom took her to buy and that she's matching with her friend. She had even bought a ticket already. I was furious with her entitlement to just make up all these plans without asking me first. I can admit it's not just her fault, but her mother's as well for not clearing it with me before buying her the dress and ticket. In fact, I wouldn't put it past her and her mother to have bought the dress and ticket before asking in order to force me into letting her go. I want to teach her a lesson about asking first and not assuming that I'm just going to let her do whatever she wants and that she can't manipulate people in order to get her way. So I told her that if she had asked first, I'd be happy to let her go to her homecoming dance. But since she decided to make plans and buy stuff before even asking if she could go, I wasn't going to let her. She cried and told me that you can only get one freshman homecoming, and I told her that maybe she should have thought about that. I said all homecomings are the same anyway, that she has 3 more opportunities to go and she's not missing much. She sulked in her room for the rest of the day and didn't talk much. I tried to comfort her, but my wife said not to because I'd be teaching her that I'll give her my attention if she acts upset and cries. I went to comfort her anyway because I didn't think she was acting, but she rejected me. That infuriated me even more, so I left her in her room to cry alone. Her mother was furious when she found out and demanded that I pay her back the money she spent on the dress and homecoming ticket. I said absolutely not because she didn't clear it with me before buying those things, so it's her own fault. However, she contacted her attorney, who contacted mine, and long story short, I got to sit down with my wife and our family therapist for a painstaking conversation about communication. It's now long after homecoming, and my daughter is pretty much back to normal, but she's still angry with me for not letting her go to that dance. I stand firmly by my decision not to let her go. But was I the jerk? You're the jerk. I stopped reading at Teach Her a Lesson. It's a school dance. She's not having privileges restricted for poor behavior, so this is just about your ego and need for control, which is a stupid thing to subject a kid to. You're really claiming your kid and her mother are scheming to strong-arm you into a school event that most parents are excited to take pictures for, getting all dressed up for a first formal high school dance? You're the jerk. It's standard high school stuff, and your daughter will never forget this. It isn't some wild after-party, it's literally her homecoming dance. I cannot even imagine my father acting this way towards me. She will always remember Dad not letting her go to her freshman homecoming for such a petty reason. Yes, it's important to teach your kids to ask permission and not expect, but she didn't even ask you to pay for anything or expect anything from you at all. You blew this way out of proportion. You're the jerk. I'm a dad of teenagers too, including daughters. You need to hear this. Kids her age are starting to learn to be independent. She's exercising her independence in a safe manner by going to a school-sanctioned event, and for some weird reason you don't want her to? Why on earth should she have to ask you to go to homecoming? Please apologize to her for interfering with her plans. Please tell her you realize you were wrong. There was no reason for you to stop her from going. Tell her that like all parents, you're doing your best and sometimes you make mistakes, and this was one of those times. Tell her you're going to try to do better to let her make her own decisions without having to run everything by you. Not the jerk. Going against the grain here, but most of these people bashing on you are not/will not ever make good parents. They were not raised to be respectful and ask permission before making plans, and they will not teach their spawn to either. That's why they're wasting their time here on Reddit instead of doing important things in life. Well, what are you doing? Gotta go. Got an important Zoom meeting soon. God bless you, and I hope you can save your daughter before it's too late. Well, what do you think? Is Dad a jerk for not letting her go to homecoming or not? Please let us know. I'm still in awe about that guy talking about the Zoom meeting. Bruh. That time a customer tried to return things we never even sold to her. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I was the assistant to the retail manager of a swimming pool store. We sold, as you might guess, swimming pools and swimming pool supplies. Anyone that has the misfortune of owning a pool or working in the industry knows that pool chemicals are a big part of pool maintenance and sales, and every shop has its own line of products, and they are always better than every other shop's line of products, despite it really all being the same stuff. One day, I was manning the store on closing shift. It was towards the end of the season, and things had slowed down that evening. A few minutes before closing time, I get a customer. "Oh, good, you're still open." I internally roll my eyes. We all know that line. It's 5 minutes before quitting time, but I put on my best customer service smile. Me. "How can I help you?" Customer. and I use the term loosely. I'd like to return these chemicals. Me. Okay. It's actually store policy that we cannot accept returns on chemicals. This was true. There were signs up everywhere, and it was written on receipts as well. Customers in the past would purchase chemicals, use them, then return them after filling them with water or other substitute materials. So we had stopped accepting returns years and years ago. Customer. Oh, well, can you make an exception? My pool just went down, and I don't have any use for them now. I'm just trying to recoup my losses. Me, feeling sorry for her like the sucker I was. Okay, do you have your receipt? Customer. No. Me. Well, let me see what you have. She plopped several canisters of various pool chemicals on the table. Me. These are all open and half used, and they aren't my brand of chemicals. You didn't even buy them from me. Can you give me anything for them? Me, fighting the urge to get rude. Sorry, can't help you. This must have been 10 years ago. I've moved on to a different industry and thankfully blocked out many of the painful memories of that awful job. But I'll never forget the audacity of that customer, trying to return half-used chemicals that she didn't even buy from me. Reply. Back in my teens, I worked for a place that sold and installed above-ground pools. Absolute worst disasters waiting to happen a homeowner could put upon themselves of their own volition. We received a call from a homeowner who had the largest pool we sold at the time. This was mid-1980s, which was an 18 by 22 above ground. He said his pool collapsed. Naturally, the owner of the business sent us out there in a panic. The homeowner's street was on a hill with them being at near the top. The freshly shocked pool water, all 6,000 gallons of it, had washed across 4 yards, one of which had several thousands of dollars in landscaping. It killed a lot of plants and washed away several smaller structures. The homeowner sued us for shoddy installation, but it turned out the idiot had hit the pool with his lawn tractor. Apparently, his neighbors didn't like the guy too much, and 2 of them signed statements to our lawyer and the guy's homeowner's insurance that he was the cause of the collapse. There are idiots, there are super idiots, then there are above-ground pool owners. Am I the jerk for telling my husband that he embarrassed himself? For context, I was raised by my single father. He raised me to be totally self-serving, where I learned not only to cook, clean, etc., but to be my own handyman. This has led me to being very independent, especially around my house. My husband, on the other hand, was raised to expect to have everything done for him and never really learn any self-sustaining skills, but also raised to believe that the man is never wrong. Fast forward to last week. I needed to buy a new line trimmer as my old faithful finally gave up on life. I was busy with the kids and my husband said he would go pick it up for me. I told him which one I wanted and what brand all my power tools are. He said he understood, but when he came back, he had purchased one from a different brand. When I asked about it, he said he thought it was better and it was also cheaper than the one I wanted. This annoyed me, but I thought whatever. He tried, move on. It wasn't until I looked at it I realized he hadn't bought the battery pack to go with it. When I asked, he told me I could just use the batteries for my other tools. I tried to explain to him that this wasn't possible and why, but he didn't want to hear it. A few moments later, he said, "Okay, my brother is coming over and we can go back to the hardware store." I thought we would either be exchanging it or buying the battery pack, but I was so wrong. When we got there, he walked straight up to the tool shack and asked the tool specialist to explain to me how my Ryobi's battery would work perfectly fine in my new Makita line trimmer. Well, let's just say that this didn't go well. The tool guy sided with me and explained when you committed to a tool brand, you stay with it due to a few aspects about the batteries. He was embarrassed but quickly did the exchange when finding out the battery and charger pack cost more than the line trimmer itself. When we got home, it started. He was yelling at me about how I embarrassed him, how I'm constantly emasculating him, and how I should be a good wife and just stick to doing things appropriate. Well, this got to me and I snapped. I replied with, "The only person that's emasculating you is yourself. It's not my fault you never learned to be what you call a man," and I walked off. It's been a week now, and he only speaks to me through the kids. It's got me thinking, am I the jerk? Not the jerk. You hit the nail on the head. He's the one putting expectations on himself. There's a bigger issue here though I find disturbing. He refused to listen to you and express his controlling views. He tried to purposefully humiliate you in public and is mad at you when it backfired and is now punishing you and putting your kids in the middle of it by only communicating through them. Is this the modeling you want your kids to see? How you want your kids to treat or be treated by their spouses later? A loving, supportive spouse would never ambush another with public humiliation. This is some twisted stuff. Maybe it's time to ask yourself how your dad would want you to be treated and how he'd want you to respond to this. Not the jerk. Dude did it to himself, got embarrassed, and then tried to take it out on you, except you weren't having it either. I'd be more concerned about him taking his frustrations out on you, but you shut him down so perfectly, I don't think that's going to be a problem. Stick to your guns, find a nice high horse to sit on, maybe even an ivory tower to look down from. You are in the right here. Boss helps mean employee accidentally fire herself. This isn't my personal story, but it happened to a friend at his company, and I thought it was hilarious. The main characters are my friend, Patrick, male, then 26, Allie, female, then 29, and Boss, man who was older. Patrick and Allie worked at the same company and the same division under Boss. Allie was mean to all the employees in the division, but especially to Patrick because he was the newcomer, and he was talented and he didn't suck up to her. Her bullying tactics included, but were not limited to, taking credit for other people's ideas, convincing Patrick that the others in the division didn't like him, attempting to ruin the career of anyone who didn't suck up to her by preventing them from getting assigned to cool new projects, and last and worst, trying to get Patrick fired, which she almost succeeded in doing. She was so horrible to Patrick that his mental health suffered a decline. Everyone was vaguely aware of her behavior, but she hid the worst parts of it, so it was never quite obvious or bad enough to get her fired. Plus, she was also popular with the company's clients, who didn't know, and she was a favorite of one of the top people at the company. Allie seemed untouchable until several months after the Patrick almost gets fired incident, when the company started having a conversation about moving some of their employees to contract positions. Becoming a contractor would have its pros and cons. Contractors would pay for their own health insurance and would have no job security, being hired for individual contracts rather than a permanent employment position. But they would also be allowed to work for other companies. It was a great move for someone who was well-known and wanted more visibility and options, but a lousy move for someone lower on the totem pole. Ellie, who was somewhat of a narcissist, who believed she was destined for greatness, waltzed into Boss's office and told him she wanted to switch to a contractor position. She believed the company couldn't get by without her and would continue hiring her while she also got to work for other companies and gain fame and visibility within the industry. Boss was all smiles and pretended to be supportive of her. This is a great career move. Think of all the options you'll have. As soon as the paperwork was signed, he never hired her for a single contract, and her future with the company, the best one in the city for this particular industry, was ruined. Allie eventually found employment elsewhere, but it wasn't as good as the position she had left. Patrick found out the second part of the story years later. He was under the impression, because of what Allie had said and how people avoided him because they knew Allie didn't like him, that no one was on his side and that his coworkers and boss had actually liked her. They hadn't. Turns out, Boss felt his hands were tied because she was a favorite of one of the top people at the company, but as soon as she gave him an out that allowed him to never have to work with her again, he took it. Would I be the jerk if I forced the family's house sale? I'm 20, male. My grandma passed 4 months ago. She was the sole owner of the house previously owned by her husband/my grandpa, who himself inherited it from his grandpa. Why I tell you this? So that you understand that I'm speaking about a giant, 2 full blocks colonial villa. Not only is this place extremely expensive, but it was also where 3 or 4 generations of my family grew up. All my uncles and aunts, 6 in total, and my mother were raised in there, and 2 of them are currently living in there with their families. Grandma had a very basic will, in which the house was left to my sons and daughters. Now, here comes the tricky part. I lost my mom 6 years ago to cancer. In my country, if an heir has passed, but they themselves have descendants, the inheritance goes to them. In other words, I replace my mom in my grandma's will, meaning I'm one of the 7 inheritors of the house. Thing is, I don't want the house. I need the money. If I had it, I could actually study abroad and live in my dream country, Australia if someone is wondering. Now, because I want the inheritance and money, This means there are only two options. The house is sold and all 7 of us receive cash, or the other inheritors buy my part. My aunts and uncles want to keep the house in the family, but while they are in a good economical place, there's no way for them to pay me my part. So they have resorted to emotional attacks. How could I do this to the family? That I'm a monster for valuing money over legacy, that they will completely cut me off if I go through it, etc. Honestly, I get it. The house has great emotional value, but my way of thinking is that with so many owners, and they themselves having kids, it will be inevitably sold at some point in the future. It will also begin to drain our pockets as it deteriorates with time. It has already needed its good share of renovations. On the other hand, they are middle-aged adults. They already have most of their lives set, so they have the privilege, not sure if this is the right word, to have thousands of dollars resting in bricks and memories. Not my case. What do you guys think? Reply. It doesn't matter what the internet tells you. If you force this sale, your family will never forget and probably never forgive. So balance that against the money. That said, you're the jerk in my opinion. You want your dream at the expense of other people's memories and happiness. Not the jerk. I think if you talk to an estate lawyer, you should be able to work something out where they take out a loan for your 1/7 and you get paid. Everyone sucks here. While it's not okay for them to resort to emotional attacks, I don't think it's okay for you to force the sale of the house when there are 6 other inheritors who value it immensely. Edit. I'm assuming the OP has not put the idea of them getting a loan on the table with the family and has decided to jump to selling the entire house. Well, what do you think? Is OP the jerk or are the relatives? Please let us know. He do be kinda cold for that though, bruh. But if the house is that important to them, they need to pay him off so he can be done with it. $132.21 total for a 4-night stay? Yeah, right. Our hotel is within 10 miles of a Ford assembly plant, and we get a lot of guests staying with us that are affiliated with Ford, either as a direct employee or a subcontractor coming in to do work at the plant. The Ford rate is $117 plus tax, which is a substantial savings off of our rack rate. So anyway, I had a guy check in Friday night that had a reservation for 4 nights with the Ford rate. We progressed through the check-in process, and when we get to the point where he needs to insert his card into the card reader, yes, we require guests at check-in to insert their card into the card reader. GM says it's to help cut down on fraud. He freaks out over the amount of his stay, plus incidental hold, showing on the screen. He wants to know why it's so much when he was told the rate was $117 plus tax for his stay. I told him the total showing was for $117 plus tax per night, plus the incidental hold. He starts screaming at me, saying he was told when he made the reservation that the total would be just $132 for my whole stay. I told him he must have misunderstood the reservation agent, because do you really think you'd get a room here for 4 nights for just $132? He says yes, and goes on to say that if he knew he was going to have to pay over $500, he would have made a reservation somewhere else. At this point, I was getting tired of him yelling at me, so I tell him that if he would prefer to stay somewhere else, I could cancel the check-in process and cancel his reservation, or he can have his card authorized for the full amount and be on his way to his room. He threatened to call corporate and have me fired. I told him to have at it, as I wasn't in the wrong. After steaming and stewing for a few more minutes, he finally decides he wants to stay, and we finish the check-in process. As he walks away from the front desk, he says that he will be speaking with my manager in the morning. I tell him that the GM won't be in until Monday morning. This was Friday night at approximately 11:15 p.m., but our AGM would be in at 9 a.m. Saturday morning. He says he'll wait to talk to the big boss on Monday. As an added bonus, he calls down about 30 minutes later, saying that when he made his reservation, he requested a smoking room, but didn't see an ashtray in his room. I tell him that all of our rooms are non-smoking, and if he wanted to smoke, he would need to go outside to do so. I got treated to yet another verbal assault, so I just hung up on him. Thankfully, I didn't have any more interactions with him for the rest of the night, and hopefully I won't for the remainder of his stay. Remind me again why I do this job. Am I the jerk? I told my wife to stop acting like she's too good for a local diner. Today was my younger daughter's birthday, so we asked her where she wanted to go for dinner at. She said that she wanted to go to Denny's, so that's where we went. Our daughters ordered burgers and waffles. I ordered steak, and my wife took a salad. She kept complaining about the food, saying it wasn't good. I tasted some of her salad and it tasted fine. I asked her what the problem was, and she said the diner wasn't good enough and that it isn't as good as the restaurants we usually go to. She likes to go to high-end restaurants. I took her aside and told her to stop acting like she's too good for a local diner and to suck it up for our younger daughter's happiness at least. She got mad and said that I'm being rude to her and that this restaurant was really cheap and not good enough. So I gave her the car keys and told her to drive herself home and get dinner for herself from a high-end restaurant of her choice and that I'd get a cab for myself and the kids. She stormed out of the restaurant. When the kids asked me where Mommy went, I told them that Nana called her so she had to go, but she'd make it up to them with ice cream. We had dinner, went to a movie, and took a cab home. When we reached home, I put them to bed because my wife hadn't returned yet. I called her and she said she'll be at her mom's place for the night. I think maybe I was too harsh on her. Am I the jerk? Edit. My daughters like the fast food joints a lot because they rarely get a chance to go there. My wife hates eating there, so she never takes them. I take them for a quick meal after school sometimes, but that's the only time they go there. They probably feel bad looking at their friends who get to go to such places all the time. Not the jerk. My mom did something similar to me when I got to choose a restaurant for my birthday dinner as a little kid, and I still remember how awful it was as a full-grown adult. If you're going to do a birthday event, the event is about giving the birthday kid a treat. If a parent is going to complain and sulk and otherwise ruin the meal, then there's no point in having the meal at all. You weren't harsh, you were direct, and you were 100% correct. If your wife can't put her kids' wants first for one meal a year, then she just shouldn't come to the birthday dinner. Not the jerk. Your wife was putting her snobbery above her kids' happiness while you had your priorities in the right place. You did a great job of putting your kids' needs first and made sure your wife didn't get to ruin your daughter's birthday. No, Denny's isn't fancy. It isn't fancy at all. They've never been accused of having great food, but their food isn't terrible either. It's a perfectly fine place to get a meal, and it's what her daughter wanted for her day. Your wife not being willing to sit through one basic, unexciting meal for her daughter's birthday is far worse than the quality of the food she was snubbing. Keep putting your kids first and showing them what it looks like to have your priorities in the right places. Karen sues me for child support, knowing that I'm not the father. I, 27 male, used to live in a crappy apartment building. I had a neighbor right next to me called Sarah, approximately 24 female, who had a 6-year-old son, Mark. I had lived there for 3 years and moved out about 2 months ago. My grandfather passed away and left most of his money in possessions to me and my sisters. It wasn't much after taxes, but I was able to use it as a deposit on an apartment. Sarah and her son moved in about 4 to 5 months after I did, and although she didn't talk about it, I got the feeling that her ex hadn't been the greatest. Police would come around occasionally to check if she was okay. The kid was scared stiff of loud noises and yelling, etc. I work from home, data analyst, so I was around a lot. Mark used to go to a preschool while she worked, and then after he started school, he was supposed to go to an after-school thing. Sarah works 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. as a nurse aide. Problem is that back in March of last year, his after-school thing closed, and then a couple months later, his school shifted all their learning online, while his mom only got busier because of what was going on. I kept seeing him playing outside by the road or hanging off the balcony and was a bit worried for his safety, so I started offering him hot chocolate and keeping an eye on him. About a week later, Sarah came by and offered me $20. She was very apologetic and explained that her parents disowned her and she couldn't afford a full-time nanny for him, but also couldn't afford to quit her job to keep an eye on him, which was basically her only other option. My older sister is a nurse, and I'd seen her looking shattered and with bruises on her face from her masks, so I felt really bad for them and offered to keep an eye on Mark while she worked, since I was at home anyway, and he's a cool kid. Long story short, I told Sarah in October I was moving out, and she was distraught about what she'd do with Mark. Schools and daycare still haven't reopened here yet. I offered for her to drop him off at my new place while she was working as a temporary solution during lockdown. This had been working for the past couple of months until I received a letter from a lawyer basically informing me that Sarah was filing for child support against me as I had taken a paternal figure in Mark's life. I immediately called Sarah and told her to come get Mark. We had a massive fight because basically she thinks I can afford it, so why shouldn't I pay it? After she picked him up, I blocked her number and contacted a lawyer who told me that I would probably be fine as I'm not his dad and I never offered to take care of him in any financial way. Sarah has been in touch with my sisters who think that I'm doing the right thing by not paying, but I'm being a jerk by refusing to look after Mark anymore. I feel like crap, since he's probably being stuck in those crappy apartment blocks again, but I also don't want to risk a court case. Am I the jerk for refusing to look after him while she works? Tiny update. Thank you all for your lovely messages. I can't see some of them because of a Reddit error that keeps popping up, but I'm trying to read all of them. I've said this a few times in the comments, but we'll put it here too. After what has happened, I have contacted the authorities. I haven't had an update from them, but I will post here if I hear anything. My Karen sister demands I pay off her BMW. About a year ago, my sister, G, who's 23, bought a BMW she couldn't afford. She also had a bad habit of getting expensive items for TikTok and Instagram posts. I lucked out on hitting the jackpot with my wife and job. My wife typically makes a lot more money than I do, but she's currently on bed rest with a difficult pregnancy. It has been almost 2 months. It will last the rest of the pregnancy. She has inherited aplastic anemia. While we have some savings, we live within our means with 2 paid-off cars and a nice 2-bedroom house. My dad, who speaks English as a second language, calls me upset that someone is trying to steal my sister's car. It was being repossessed for non-payment. I called my sister and asked what was going on. She first said she was 1 month behind, then admitted she was 3 months behind. She said she would have the money next week. She never called the car dealership to follow up, and the car was sold, sticking my sister with the remaining balance. Now she doesn't have a car and is driving my dad's older Jeep. I have offered my car for her to use, but it's a Toyota, and she rejected it. She's been harassing both of my parents because she says I could have lent her the money, and my wife is lazy about her pregnancy. Now I'm getting unwanted advice about getting my wife back to work, since she has worked from home previously. My wife is sick. I'm already worried about her health. She's losing weight around the 6 months and isn't eating well. My sister has told me our mom had 7 kids, and my wife is milking the pregnancy for attention. At this point, I cut my sister off and stopped going to my parents' house, where she lives. A few family members think I'm the jerk for not helping my sister financially with a car that she couldn't afford in the first place. Not the jerk. Your sister sounds like an entitled brat. You do not owe her anything. Her lack of concern for your wife and her unborn niece or nephew is incorrigible. She is an adult now and needs to start acting like one. Not the jerk. You're a good person for sticking by your wife, and your sister is an entitled child who is in for a rude awakening. When adults buy things they cannot afford subsequent payments on, this is what happens. The family members who are behind her are enabling this entitlement. You're the jerk. I had a cousin who won the lottery many years ago and refused to help anyone in the family, even in 2009 when my family had our home foreclosed on. Again, lottery winner cousin didn't lift a finger to help. What your sister asked for was next to nothing, and you couldn't even be bothered with it? I hope you feel good about yourself and how privileged you are. Well, what do you think? Should OP have given money to his sister or not? Please let us know. Too bad, so sad. Should have bought a DeLorean instead, baby mama. Heck hath no fury like me scorned. This story starts 31 years ago, but the revenge part was pure serendipity that began 2 years ago. I'm going to shorten most parts because it's a crazy ride, but I'll be happy to answer any questions y'all have. I learned a ton on this journey, and part of the reason for this write-up is to share that with others. The beginning. In 1990, when I was just out of middle school and my sister was still in elementary, my dad met his 3rd wife at the only gas station in our town. They soon moved in together, and he abandoned us in our old basement apartment to live in a shanty houseboat that didn't run to live with her. He would show up every other week and give me $40 for groceries. Eventually, someone figured out the situation and called my mom. We went to live with her, which was, believe it or not, worse. My dad and his shanty wife got married in 1991. Not long after, she called me and told me that my dad's brain tumor had returned. It hadn't, and that he couldn't handle the stress of being around us. That the only people he could bear to be around were her and her son, Shorty, who was my age. When I called my dad to ask if this was true, he said it wasn't, and he just couldn't believe that she would say that to begin with. That was one of our last conversations until 2 years ago. The middle. There's not much in this part. I worked my way through college, living in my car from time to time. My dad and I were no contact, but I heard from family that he had bought a house and put his son through some vocational classes. When my grandmother passed, Shorty and Shanty wife showed up in a truck and took all the furniture and anything else that wasn't tied down or already gone. Eventually, I went no contact with my dad's side of the family. I struggled for years, decades really, but I made it, and I have a great job and a good family now. The best revenge is living well, right? The pre-end warm-up. 2 years ago, October of 2019, I got a call from my dad's brother, Alan. He told me my dad was in a nursing home in another state. Great. And I needed to go see him because he needed my help. What the heck? Shorty had ghosted him. The nursing home, coincidentally, was about 20 minutes from my house, and I saw an opportunity and I went. The reunion was underwhelming. I didn't want to make amends, but I did want to hear how he wound up dumped and all alone in another state. And it was a really, really good story. Shanty wife had got lung cancer and put my dad in a nursing home before she passed in 2017. Shorty became his power of attorney when she passed and had been visiting my dad, living in my dad's house with his 2 kids, and taking care of my dad's affairs since his mom passed. But now he was MIA, and my dad was worried about him. He asked me to drive the hour and a half to his house to check on everything. That's all he wanted. He never even asked me how I had been. I agreed to go, I think out of morbid curiosity. I'd never even been to my dad's house. I did want to see where he lived with his real family for 30 years. I wanted to see what could have been my life. It was 50 shades of awful. The grass hadn't been cut all summer. You couldn't get to the front door from the overgrowth. There were 3 pickup trucks in the yard. 2 were full of trash. Cabs and beds and back seats, just trash. Mail, clothes, paper, shoes, garbage bags. I couldn't understand it. My dad's handicap-modified SUV was on 4 flats and full of garbage too. I didn't have a key, so I just walked around. From what windows I could look through, the inside was in shambles and hoarded to heck. On the front and carport doors were dozens of notices from the city that they were going to condemn the place. The carport was also hoarded. Boxes and boxes stacked on each other, most rotting from the rain. The yard was full of garbage, broken Christmas ornaments, more shoes, rusted tools, old toys. There was a letter in the mailbox notifying him that since the house was abandoned, mail would not be delivered anymore. That night, I Googled powers of attorney and how to use them. I went back the next day and showed my bed-bound dad the pictures on my phone. He vowed to beat Shorty up, then asked me to help more. I told him I would, but he'd have to sign power of attorney over to me. All of it, durable, financial, and medical. If he didn't, he could figure this stuff out by himself. He agreed, so I set about finding a lawyer who would drive to another state and do the paperwork in the nursing home. Bless that lawyer for being so good at his job, because all I did was tell him what I knew, and he put together a beautifully bulletproof POA. It was full of stuff I didn't even know I would need. He also filed the paperwork to revoke Shorty's POA, and now I'm unstoppable. We're from a small rural town, and it's the kind of creepy, landlocked place that no matter how long you've been gone or how far away you've been, when you go back, you'll see someone you know. Even if you don't know, you know them. It's like playing 7 Degrees of Everybody, all the time. It's suffocating, but it can also be helpful. The beginning of the end. I got to work the next morning. I didn't know how scorched the earth would be when I finished, and I didn't want Shorty or anyone from his prolific inbred family trying to find me, so I made sure nothing I did had my name on it. I opened a Google account for my dad and got a Google number. I opened a P.O. box for him in his town. I put in a mail forwarding notice. I pulled his credit report. I took the POA to my dad's small town bank, changed the address on his accounts, and got new account numbers. I requested copies of every transaction back to the day Shanty wife had passed, about 13 months worth. I had to go to the main branch 2 hours from my house the next day to pick the records up. I sat in the lobby all afternoon going through the account. I cornered a service rep and got a crash course in his debits and deposits. This is when I figured out the extent of Shorty's staggering stupidity. My dad got about $5,000 a month in disability and Social Security every month. Twice a week, Shorty was going into a branch and withdrawing cash, all of the cash, for 13 months. And every time he did it, as the POA, He had to sign a form stating that he was acting on behalf of my dad, and that form was notarized by the bank. I went through every withdrawal and got the bank to confirm that every one of them was made by Shorty. Then I went to the house and called a locksmith. I knew it was bad, but I had no idea what was waiting for me there. He got the first door open and the stench rolled out like a fog bank. We both gagged. 2 locks later, I was so embarrassed by what he had to see and smell, I gave him a $60 tip. And with shiny new keys in hand, I called the cops. I told them I was POA for my dad, was checking on his house, and there were 3 vehicles there that didn't belong to him. He asked me if I knew who they belonged to. I said no, and I wanted them towed. He told me to call a tow company and he would meet them there. They showed up with 2 wreckers. The tow truck guy got out and asked me for a signature. I only signed my first name. As I was signing, he asked, "Do you know Shorty?" Running on pure hatred at this point, I surprised myself. "Do you?" I asked. He said he did, and that he's a jerk. I responded, "He might be. Hey, can you do me a favor? If you see him, will you tell him MNWNM is coming for him?" His bravado evaporated. He knows a crazy when he sees one. They towed the trucks. When everyone was gone, I opened the door in the carport to peek in. The sun was going down and it was dark in the house. I heard something faint, and after some seconds realized it was the roaches and the rats doing their roach and rat stuff. I could smell it all in my hair. I sat on the carport steps and watched the sun go down. I was mad, just so cosmically livid that 72 hours was all it took to dissolve 3 decades, and here I was, stinking and listening to the rats and cleaning everyone else's crap up, taking time away from my family. And for what? I had it coming to Jesus with myself. I could either bow out now or double down. And the thing is, I'm tenacious, to a fault. I had to be to survive, and this was a bone I couldn't put down. The thought of Shorty's life being upended, his only source of income, probably, disappearing literally overnight, and my dad having to hear secondhand from me that he's broke and alone made me absolutely giddy. I desperately wanted them both to lose what they had left, so I decided I was going to triple dog down. That night, I Googled restraining orders, and it was surprisingly easy to get one. I went to the courthouse in my hometown, went to the clerk's office, and told her I needed a restraining order. I filled the form in at a rickety little table while I was there. I wasn't prepared to see a judge that day, but she took the form and said, "Okay, I'll see if the judge is still here." That kind of scared me. She took me to his chambers, and as I was waiting, I looked around and saw he had certificates of appreciation hanging up from various veterans groups. Then I wiped my palms and thought, fish in a barrel. He asked about my dad's stint in the Marines and about the DoD office logo on my sweater. I'm a contractor. He read my form and granted the temporary order. I would have to go back for the permanent one where Shorty would be able to argue against it. Then I went home and Googled biohazard companies and elder treatment statutes in my state. I hired a biohazard company to shovel all the crap out of the house for $7,000. I would have paid double. They found my dad's mummified dog under some pizza boxes in the master bedroom. They sent me pictures and salvaged some papers. Shorty was served during this time and a hearing was set. I got to work collecting and documenting crap. I made pictures and spreadsheets and timelines with cross-references because now they had my full attention. The paid versions of Truthfinder and Trello seriously got me through all this. In my spare time, I went to the nursing home and gave my dad 8x10 copies of the pictures of his dead dog, from every angle. Before court, I went to the police station nearby and told them that I wanted to report an elder mistreatment crime. A white-collar detective came out and told me it was a domestic matter and that since Shorty had been POA, everything he had done was legal. And this was the day I got to teach a small-town detective about the fiduciary responsibilities of a POA. Thanks, Google. I handed him a copy of the statute with the applicable sections highlighted. Then I handed him a thick folder with bank statements, pictures of the hoarded house and the dead dog, a copy of my dad's credit report that showed he was tens and tens of thousands of dollars in debt, and a spreadsheet listing every cash withdrawal with a running total of the stolen amounts. The grand total was just over $130 in cash. That's not including the lost value of the house or the credit cards he opened and used. I told him he could keep that folder since it wasn't the only one I had. Then I told him I would wait for a case number and I sat down. He came back about 30 minutes later and apologized, said I had a case, and gave me a case number. Then I headed over to the courthouse. This is the end. There were other people there, and I had to wait my turn. And while I was waiting, that stupid jerk walked his sloppy self into the courtroom by himself, and obviously, literally, non-metaphorically, dirty. His shoes were untied, and that turned my giggle box over. Then it was our turn, and we stood up. The same judge asked me some questions, asked him some questions, and asked me if I had any proof. I had a very thick folder of it. The judge asked me if I'd gone to the police. Well, yes, sir, I have. Do you have a case number? As a matter of fact, the order was granted permanently and for life, but not before the judge halted proceedings and told Shorty he needed a lawyer. Someone told me that the courthouse would have a copy of my dad's DD-214 discharge papers, so while I was there, I got a copy of those, because why not? I also used my POA to take Shanty Wife off the deed to the house. That way, if my dad passed and it went into probate, Shorty had no immediate claim. I also went and got copies of my dad's birth certificate and Shanty's wife's death certificate. Technically, stepkids can't request that kind of info, but the clerk who waited on me recognized my dad's name and told me she had hooked up with my Uncle Alan in the 60s and went to my grandparents' funeral. So I got all the forms I wanted. Shanty Wife left my dad $50,000 in life insurance. About $35,000 of that was left since Shorty was spending my dad's money and not his mom's. So I opened an Ally account and transferred every penny over. Then I set up recurring transfers for the monthly deposits. At any given time, there was no more than $100 in his account. I also found a house flipper that paid me enough for the house to pay off his mortgage. That's the thing about probate. There's nothing to fight over if there's nothing there. And I made sure there was nothing there. My dad passed thinking he still owned a house. Speaking of which, this is about the time I found my dad's life insurance policies. They were up to date and Shanty Wife was the beneficiary. My POA didn't allow me to change beneficiaries, but it allowed me to assign them. And since Shanty Wife was gone, there was technically no beneficiary. This is where the death certificates came in handy. I assigned my sister and me as beneficiaries. Irrevocable too, which means that the only way to change that is for my dad and me and my sister to agree to it. I kept my dad in the dark about all this. The only thing he ever really knew about was the restraining order and his dog. I found out that he had purchased the gravesite next to Shanty Wife and wanted to be buried next to her. That was just never going to happen. I Googled national cemeteries and found out he qualified to be in one since he was a disabled Vietnam-era veteran. So I arranged for that instead. All the cherries on top. My dad passed in June this year, and I was there. He's buried in a national cemetery far away where no one will ever go visit him. The only obituary I ran was on the funeral home's website, and that only for insurance purposes. I wrote it as vague as possible. There was no service. His urn is purple, the color he hated most. I got a call in August from the prosecutor's office in my hometown. The lady on the other end is married to my first cousin because of course she is. That's how it works there. Shorty was arrested just after midnight on July 1st, was still in jail, and had been arraigned on felony elder mistreatment charges. He's facing 10 years in FPMITA prison now. She told me not to expect the trial anytime soon, as it can take up to 3 years for that to happen. I told her that was awesome, since the uncertainty will hopefully haunt him. And after all that, he's still got prison to look forward to. He lost his kids. He lost his dad. I'm spending his mom's money. He lost his free house and trucks. He has no credit and will never be able to get any sort of decent job and will, hopefully for a long time, not be able to find a decent place to live. And I sleep like a baby. You can't get quarters from bug bites. When I was in the Army, my unit had a training day one day where we did tactical movements and close quarter combat with paintball guns. It was pretty fun, except it was in Texas in the middle of summer in a training area full of tall grass that I ended up crawling around in a lot. I didn't notice any problems until a couple hours later when I was getting ready to head home and my legs started burning. I pulled my boots off and rolled my pants up, and my feet and legs up to mid-thigh were swollen and covered in hundreds of angry red welts. Apparently, I'd crawled through a nest of chiggers, tiny biting bugs common in America that are apparently called Trombiclidae officially. and they had gone to town on my legs, bad enough to provoke an allergic reaction. I drive myself to the emergency room at the base hospital, and while I'm waiting to be seen and feeling more and more terrible but needing to focus on something else, I started counting the bites. I stopped when I got to 100, and that was just on the inside of my right calf. The doctor had never seen anything like it, and I ended up getting a massive dose of antibiotics and inflammatories, all hospital grade and with serious side effects of their own, as well as 4 days of quarters, the military equivalent of being told to stay home and don't come into work. My girlfriend came and picked me up from the hospital and drove me home because at that point I was in no state to drive myself between the allergic reaction and the meds I was on to treat it. On the way home, I called my sergeant to let him know about my situation so he can get word up the chain of command. About an hour after that, I get a call from the first sergeant, the senior-most NCO in the unit, herself. Now, she was one of the most incompetent first sergeants I ever worked with during my time in the Army, constantly making terrible decisions, mindlessly greenlighting whatever terrible decision our equally incompetent captain came up with, and micromanaging people unnecessarily. She tells me that my quarters have been revoked by the captain and that I have to come in the following day. I tell her that I'm holding orders in my hand from a doctor who's also a lieutenant colonel, that I'm supposed to take time off to recover. She responds with, "You can't get quarters from bug bites," and rants at me that I'm just malingering and trying to get out of work. There was no way I could possibly seriously be ill from just some bug bites. I tried to explain that I had had an allergic reaction, but she wasn't having it, insisting I was a liar and a bad soldier because of it. I was to be at formation the next morning at 09 because of the extensive exercise we all got at the training event. They'd canceled PT for the day, with my supposed quarter slip, and they would decide then if they were going to punish me more for trying to pull this stunt. Cue malicious compliance. Okay, I wore my PT uniform, a t-shirt and shorts, rather than our fatigues the next day, and had my girlfriend drive me in. I was still too messed up from the bites and meds to drive. I figured if I was going to get in trouble anyways, being in the wrong uniform would be the least of my worries. But my bare legs inside showed off the literal hundreds of now angrily red, almost purple or black in some cases, huge welts on my legs. The skin was more welt than not by the next morning. And I walked up showing off that rather horrific sight to my entire company of more than 100 enlisted NCOs and officers. Literally everyone who sees me is like, "Goodness, Quester, what the heck happened to your legs?" It's clear to every single person in the company that I am actually legitimately having an allergic reaction just by sight alone. The first sergeant hears people making a ruckus, sees me, and turns bright red, knowing she messed up when she hears me answering warrant officers, including my direct supervisor, asking, "Why are you here if you're that sick?" with, "First sergeant made me come in and told me that you can't get quarters because of bug bites." Within 10 minutes, I've handed in a copy of my quarter slip, gotten a quiet and very private apology from the first sergeant, and was sent home for the next 4 days. Would I be the jerk for taking everything in my dad's will? I, 38, have been no contact with my dad and 2 younger siblings for many years. My dad always treated me like crap because he was convinced that my mom cheated on him, because she did, a lot, and trapped him into a crappy marriage and that I was not biologically his. For my 13th birthday, my dad bought me a paternity test, and even though the test results came back that I am indeed his, he accused me, or my mother, of hooking up with the test guy. I have also done an ancestry DNA test and also matched with all his relatives, so I'm pretty sure that unfortunately, he is my biological dad. I've known for a long time that my younger sister was not my dad's. When I did my ancestry DNA test, my sister wanted to get one done too. My mom freaked out, admitted her indiscretion, and begged me to convince my sister that it was a waste of money and that she could just have a copy of my results. I did because I thought I was protecting her and she was going through a rough time at the time. I recently got a notification about an ancestry DNA match. I looked it up and it looks like my brother's ex-wife got one of the kits for both of my brother's kids. And lo and behold, my brother's kids only seem to share relatives from my mom's side. FYI, my profile uses a screen name, so she would not have recognized who I was. My brother and sister have been really crappy to me for years. Comments about how I owed their dad for him putting a roof over my head as a child, and how dare I accept items from their grandmother's estate, etc. I put up with it for years because they are younger and honestly not that bright. I thought they'd come around eventually. My dad made sure in a drunken fight with my mother to give me a copy of his will, still have it, so that I knew that he had put a stipulation in there about his estate being divided amongst his biological kids. I know that he has not changed his will since because his mental capacity has changed. TMI. Would I be the jerk if I did not tell my siblings and just let this play out at the will reading? Take everything and kick them out of the family home? I would also be setting up funds for my nephew since my loser brother doesn't pay child support. My husband thinks that this is stooping to their level, as they both rely on his estate currently for survival, so this will ruin them. They have no education or way to support themselves currently. But I kind of want to stoop. Reply. Check with a lawyer. Due to the stipulation in your will, you will need to demand a DNA test. Would recommend you not stir the pot for now. All it will do is put your siblings on the defensive and they will probably start some expensive shenanigans. Wait to let the drama unfold at the will reading. Make sure the will is kept somewhere safe. If they know they will not inherit it, they will try to destroy that will. Not the jerk, but I think you will be unpleasantly surprised if you expect to wave around an ancestry test at a will reading and magically the estate goes to you. If there's real money involved, including value of the house, I think you consult a lawyer now while he's still alive. I'm sorry you have a crappy dad and siblings. Christian holier than thou entitled Mom is back. This time, I'm not so nice. To give some background, every Christmas, me and my wife do our own version of Secret Santa, where we find some family in our church or surrounding community that is very financially strained and might not be able to afford Christmas gifts that year, and buy gifts for everyone in that family. This has been the 4th year we've done this, and quite frankly, it's a very rewarding experience to deliver holiday joy to a family in need. We mainly find our families secretly by asking church friends if they might know of a family that is going through a very tough time financially. Most of the time, the family either knows a Secret Santa is helping that year or is completely blindsided Christmas morning with special delivery. Although due to lockdown, we plan to load the presents on the doorstep and ring the doorbell as we get the family's reaction from the sidewalk. Now, on to the story. We got our information for 2 separate families that needed help this year, and me and my wife were planning out which gifts to buy for both families, gift budget, etc. During our brainstorming session, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. When I picked up, it was a kid's voice informing me that, "My mother would like to talk to you." I could hear the kid hand the phone to someone else, and then I was greeted by a familiar voice, the entitled mom of the story, aka Friend's aunt. Entitled Mom. "Hello, OP?" Me, eyes growing wide and silently cursing under my breath. Entitled Mom? To what do I owe the pleasure? Entitled Mom. "Well, I'm glad you asked. My nephew mentioned during a family Zoom call earlier that you were buying Christmas gifts for random strangers this year and how commendable your charitable giving was." Me, mildly flattered at my friend's words, but at the same time wishing that he just kept his mouth shut. "Well, he is correct. I am doing a Secret Santa this year." "Perfect. That's why I wanted to call you." Me, you know of a family in need? "Yeah, me." One thing I should point out about Entitled Mom that I learned from my friend is that she used to be married to a rich guy whose family owned some oil fields. From what I understand, when they divorced, she didn't get ownership of the family's assets. Despite this, she still stuck the guy with alimony and gained 70% custody of their child. Back to the story. Me, you need help? Entitled Mom. "Yes. You see, I really wanted to get my son a PS5 for Christmas, and since my gift budget is already strained this year, I'd figured you could step up and help me bring him some holiday joy." Me, already suspecting that something is very suspicious here. "What do you mean that your gift budget is already strained?" "Well, my car broke down, and I decided to buy a new one." Me, well, that's unfortunate. Hopefully your new car is reliable. "Sure is. I decided to treat myself to an early Christmas gift and bought one of those brand new Cadillac Escalades." I just so happened to have my Chromebook in front of me during the call, so I used it to look up the MSRP for a new Escalade, which had a starting price of above $75,000. At that moment, a very cold anger had started to arise in me, much akin to my previous encounter with the Entitled Mom. Here she is, again trying to take advantage of me just to get a PS5 for her kid while she blows money on a Cadillac. She could have bought a much cheaper car and could still have money left over for multiple PS5s and could have still had money left over to buy gifts for multiple families. My wife could see that I was not in a good mood and looked concerned as I walked into my office. I may have been nice to the entitled mom before, but this time I was going to give her a piece of my mind. Entitled mom: "So, going back to the PS5, if you could get one with a few games." Me, cutting her off: "No." "Excuse me?" Me: "I will not be buying your son a PS5 for Christmas." "But he really wants one. Are you going to deny a kid's wish?" Me: "Let me tell you something about my charitable giving. It goes to families that barely have enough to get by at the end of the day and are staring down the barrel of choosing between rent or Christmas gifts, not entitled people like you who have poor spending habits." Entitled mom scoffs: "Why, I never. How dare you?" Me: "Look who's talking. You obviously have more than enough money to purchase an SUV that costs more than a blue-collar income. Yet here you are trying to bum a free PS5 off of me, all because your budget is strained? If your budget is so strained, then why don't you sell that overpriced car and buy one yourself?" "You should watch your tongue. You know, the Bible says that the younger generations should be subject to your elders." This pushed me over the edge. At this point, I was fuming and had decided it was time to burn a bridge with entitled mom. Me: "You know what? Maybe if you spent more time actually reading your Bible instead of thumping it all the time, you'd actually be more thoughtful of people other than yourself. Heck, maybe you'd be the one doing the Secret Santa. Don't you ever call my phone again. Clearly, you are someone who is not worth wasting my time on. I'd wish you a Merry Christmas, but maybe even that's too good for you." Hangs up. I blocked the number and proceeded to text my friend to make sure that his aunt never contacts me again. Oddly enough, I didn't need to take time to calm down. Telling entitled mom off was actually quite cathartic. Karen thinks my unborn baby belongs to her because she is a godly married woman. This evening, I was at a different church from the one I usually attend. I had work a longer shift than usual, so I couldn't make it to mine on time. I'm familiar with this group of believers as I went to their church's school in high school. I go in, find a seat, and settle in. After the service is over, I'm walking around, talking to people who I haven't seen in a while. They're extending congratulations and asking about my pregnancy, which, when done respectfully, is fine. However, it was not to last. Up walks Sister Karen. "Oh my, Tannerland, when did you get married?" "I didn't get an invite." She wouldn't get an invite regardless. "No, Sister Karen, I didn't find the one just yet. I had artificial insemination done to bring my little love-to-be." Cue a face longer than two horses combined. "Wow, Tannerland, I didn't think you would be so stupid and not think about how selfish you are. There are so many folks that are both married and actually serve the church. You could have offered your womb to these godly folks so that they could raise the child in church and in a complete home." I was in so much shock, I could not form words. "I and Brother Karen will be happy to raise that child." She's pointing at my pregnant stomach. "In a complete home. We cannot have any more, so this is a great blessing to our family." I said, "Haha, you got any more jokes? This is my baby. If you come near me or my kid, or any of the kids that I have, you will be getting changed along an RO." Then I just went to continue talking to other people. On my way back to my car, she tried to pray over me to give my baby to her and her husband. The innocent and unfortunate baby in my womb. She is nuts. She's always been a nutter, but today, just the entire cake along with the plate it was sitting on. Some people. I understand some Redditors have a different opinion about church and faith than I do, which is your business, but please scroll on if you only want to say negative things about the believers. Thank you. Am I the jerk for refusing to host Thanksgiving for over 20 people for the 4th year in a row? So my fiance has a rather large family. Parents, 2 brothers with significant others, numerous adult nieces and nephews and their partners, and there's usually always some distant aunt, uncle, or cousins that tag along. I have 2 family members that join holidays. This year, neither will be able to attend. Last year, one was present. So for the past 4 years, I've been single-handedly cooking from scratch and hosting for both Thanksgiving and Christmas. So essentially, I've been cooking dinner for 20 people or so while my partner babysits a brisket in the smoker. There's a lot of logistics behind cooking for a large crowd. I start prepping the night before, cook all morning and afternoon, and by the time everything is done, I'm too exhausted to enjoy the food I cooked and eat. Last year, I requested that everyone attending bring one side dish or dessert. No one brought anything. I had a feeling that's what it was going to be, as no one mentioned what they're bringing, so I prepared for it anyway. Just to also mention, I've never been thanked for hosting or cooking, literally by no one. All leftovers get picked over and taken home. Last year, I also had to cook the following day because there was nothing left to eat, except some baked brie that my mother-in-law turned her nose up to, and I wanted to enjoy leftovers at least. This year, I told my partner that I have no intention of cooking. If he wanted to host, he can cater. His reaction was, "But that's our tradition. Can't you at least make some boxed stuffing or something?" And, "Everyone is planning on coming." My reaction was, "Nope, that's your tradition. I will not make boxed stuffing. And, if they're planning on coming, you better put that catering order in." He has not spoken to me since. I also had to explain, and I shouldn't have to, that I haven't been feeling well. I finished an 8-month course of a pretty rough medication that dries out all the joints in your body. I've been achy and miserable, and I feel stiff when I overwork myself. Am I the jerk for not wanting to entertain 20+ people twice a year every year? I've decided to possibly sit out Thanksgiving completely. Buy a pre-made single-serving Thanksgiving dinner at the local grocery store that just needs to be popped in the oven for a while, and going to watch that new Lady Gaga movie. Edit. Guys, my partner found this post and sent me the link. Now apparently we're canceling everything because I'm venting to strangers on the internet. I guess he didn't like what he read. Oops. Not the jerk. So his Thanksgiving tradition is, we pick one woman who's been brought into the family, we tell her that her partner is hosting Thanksgiving, then we load her with all of the responsibility for hosting and catering. We don't help or thank her. Her partner isn't allowed to do anything apart from barbecue duties. But what can you do? It's tradition. Yeah, forget that. If it's so important to your fiancé, he can host and cook. If he's that incapable, then he needs to stop volunteering. Go a step further. Rent a hotel room for a week or stay with a friend. Make sure that if he goes through with hosting, he's not only left with full responsibility for catering and hosting, he also has to clean up by himself. Edit. OP, I just saw your edit about your fiancé seeing this post. I encourage you to follow your plans regardless. Thanksgiving is going to be nasty if you don't. Please don't subject yourself to any more of that. P.S. OP's fiancé, you really suck so far at this whole being a fiancé thing. Improve, and fast. Do something nice and apologize instead of complaining that she felt so alone she had to talk to a bunch of strangers to realize that she wasn't the jerk. You did that. You did her over. Stop it. Not the jerk. I'm not understanding why they did not bring anything when you asked. He probably loves to feel like big man on campus and hosting. Calmly explain it's just too much for you alone. Then write up a list of what the meal consists of, hand it to him, and let him know that he needs to call everyone and assign a dish to them. I too was cooking for over 20 people several years in a row. I finally made a list of the meal I wanted, these 3 sides times 2, these 3 desserts times 2, appetizers times 2, and sent an email to the entire group. Here is a list for Thanksgiving. I made it easy for you all. I will be making the turkey, and that's it. Talk amongst yourselves, decide who is bringing what. If you don't bring it, we will not have it. Do not ignore the times 2, because with 20 people, 1 pan of any of the above will not be enough for all. I love you all, but again, I will not be providing anything more than the turkey as this year. I would like to enjoy the meal with you all versus serving everyone all day. My mother-in-law apologized for not realizing others were not chipping in. She always brought a ham and whipped everyone into shape, including the adult nephews and nieces. It's worked out wonderfully since then. Or if hubby is set on hosting, you were right to tell him to call for catering. Besides restaurants, several grocery stores offer full meal catering for the holidays, but he is probably pushing a deadline by now. Good luck. My neighbor Margaret's revenge against her complete monster of a daughter. This was an ongoing story about my friend and neighbor Margaret over the course of 5 years that's escalated this past May. Margaret is this sweet late 70s woman who lives on my street. My street is sparsely populated. Her house is roughly 800 meters from mine, and there's a total of 5 houses on my rural street, so lots of space. I met Margaret when I first built my house, She was the first and only person to come say hello. She brought us a lemon pie. When my husband passed, she was the first person to check on me, and she even made it to the hospital before my mom did. A really great person. After my husband passed, I would visit her a lot. After the first visit, I noticed she never really had any food in her fridge, and I assumed she was not doing well financially. I would go over once or twice a week with prepared meals with the excuse that I cooked too much. It wasn't untrue, I always cooked too much, but I wanted to make sure she was eating. She's such a sweet woman. Well, during one of my visits, I had dropped off some food and a car pulled up and her daughter walked in. I excused myself and went home. I didn't want to be a third wheel. At this point, I had known Margaret since 2015. I didn't know she had any kids. Well, I went back over when I saw the car leave, and I went to make us some tea and opened the fridge to grab some milk I dropped off with the meals. Everything was gone, including my plates. Her daughter had taken everything. Well, we got to talking, and I found out that her daughter had been handling her finances for several years, paying her bills and taking charge of all of her pension payments. So Margaret worked for General Electric for years and had her CPP. She let me go through her old payments and she had no bills. Her house was paid off and she was supposed to be getting a total of $4,500 a month in pension payments. There's no way that she should have been in any sort of financial hardships. Her power bill was only $80 a month. I went on to find out her daughter canceled her phone, internet, and TV and car insurance, so she couldn't even drive. Well, after a bit of talking, she accepted me calling a social worker friend of mine. Well, there was some obvious mistreatment going on here. Within 24 hours, we had her daughter locked out of her bank account, her pension checks direct deposited, everything, and I made up my mind to keep a close eye on her house in case her daughter came back. Not even a week later, I see that car roll up to Margaret's house, so I decide to go for a walk to check in on Margaret. Right at the top of her driveway, I can see into her front window, and what I saw made me take out my phone and call the police and start recording. That crazy jerk was attacking her. Before you judge me why I didn't rush in to stop it, well, I'm what you'd call super tiny. I'm only 4 foot 8 inches and 80 pounds. To be truthful, it's not hard to toss me around like a rag doll. For my safety, it was better for me to wait for the police. Well, her daughter was arrested, and Margaret ended up staying with me and my family from mid-May to the end of September. Now the whole story gets super long, so I'm going to do a quick rundown of what happened. Her daughter was arrested and the RCMP got involved. Her daughter had been stealing money off Margaret for at least 5 years. Her daughter had taken over $250,000 from her bank and almost the entirety of her pension payments, over $50,000 a year. It gets better. Her daughter's son was involved with it, and after investigations, he was arrested and charged. Well, everything finished up in October. Both of them got over 2 years in prison and a no-contact order. Margaret was able to recover $200,000 and is getting her pension payments and is much happier. But that's not where the real revenge is. Margaret's house is worth over $2 million. Those two jerks are going to get out of prison with nothing. But Margaret met with an estate lawyer and she wanted to write me into her will. And I said, no, I have more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of time. Well, she wrote her will to give everything to a charity called Covenant House. It's a shelter for women. Oh yeah, she did leave her daughter and grandsons in the will. They both get a whopping 1 cent. Margaret sent a copy of it to her daughter and her daughter's kid in jail, attached to a Christmas card and a letter saying Merry Christmas. I took her to the post office today to mail it. So yeah, that's the story of Margaret's revenge. Those two jerks are sitting in jail, will come out to nothing, and will get absolutely nothing from their mother's estate. Honestly, Margaret is one of the sweetest women I have ever met. My mom moved to a place on my street, and they are like best friends. Am I the jerk for not calling out my son for treating my daughter badly? I have 2 kids, a son, Ben, who's 44, and a daughter, Emma, who's 42. Their father and I divorced when they were young. He wasn't a good husband, but he isn't a bad man. He is wealthy. He didn't bond with Emma, and he always favored Ben. It became overt as they grew up. Ben was easier than Emma and did well in school and sports. Emma, although smart, wasn't interested in school and was rebellious as a teenager. Their father spoiled Ben. And if I'm honest, he wasn't nice to Emma. This upset her and she would cry, feeling unfairly treated. I felt bad, but I couldn't do anything about it, so felt it better to pretend it wasn't happening and hope it got better. It didn't. He wanted nothing to do with her, although there wasn't a reason why. Emma struggled to cope with this, and I think expected me to stand up for her. But I hate confrontation, and her father never listens to me anyway. I preferred not to discuss it with Emma and focus on other things, but she said I didn't allow her to be upset and didn't validate her. I didn't want to potentially cause a bigger rift and cause Ben to side with his father. Ben, on the other hand, was lavished with anything he wanted. Money, cars. He was expected to be successful like his father. As adults, the relationship between Ben and Emma fizzled out, which was sad, but I couldn't do anything about it. Despite being given a large amount of wealth and more opportunities than most, Ben hasn't become successful, and he is quite resentful about it. His father stopped giving him money a few years ago, and he partially blames me because I told his father that he had given him too much. Despite being an easy kid, Ben has grown up to be a rather difficult. He has a temper and is very sensitive about his lack of career success, so we aren't allowed to talk about it. Emma is a stay-at-home mom. She's a good mom, and her children's father earns a lot of money. Her father was regretful, so he reconnected with her. They have a relationship. It's quite superficial, but I think it healed the wound a bit for Emma, so she reached out to Ben. They got along well for a couple of years, but Ben stopped speaking to Emma. Emma was upset and thinks it's because Ben doesn't like their father's interest in her. Ben hasn't given her an explanation, but he told me a silly reason that doesn't make sense. I told Emma I think Ben has behaved very badly. She asked me if I told him that. I said no, and she shouted at me that I've never stuck up for her or protected her, and if I can't do it this one time, she doesn't want a relationship with me. That I enable this behavior at her expense, and she's sick and tired of it. The thing is, Emma has 3 kids, and Ben has 1 kid. Emma will still allow me to have a good relationship with her kids, but Ben has made it difficult for me to see his kid in the past when he is angry, so I'm afraid he will do that again and stop speaking to me. I also don't want to be forced to be in the middle of them, so I won't do it. Am I the jerk? You're the jerk for being a total failure as a mother to your daughter. You allowed this behavior by not sticking up for her. So what if you hate confrontation? Does that give you a right to emotionally abandon her? You are terrible, and if I were her, I'd never speak to you again, since you just want to suck up to your son for the sake of being grandma. I hope Emma cuts you all out of her life. You've all failed her. You're the jerk. You make excuse after excuse for why you have never protected your daughter from her father, and now you're doing the same about her brother, letting her down all over again. What exactly does your daughter need to do to make you see that her feelings are worthwhile? That she needs someone on her side? You might also want to examine why you always defer to the men in your life at the expense of your daughter's self-esteem. You seem to judge men by how much money they earn, as if this gives them more worth. You even sound more approving of your daughter's well-paid husband than you do of her. Forced to be in the middle of them? For all of the years your daughter has been on Earth, you have chosen any side but hers. I reckon it's her turn for love and support. Whether you have the courage to give it to her at last is another matter. You've been an emotional coward so far. My heart goes out to that girl. It really does. Am I the jerk for potentially ruining my classmate's career? I, 20 female, am a college student. In my country, a lot of students hunt for internships because it helps them get a better pay package during placements. I've been casually talking with this guy, R, who's also my classmate. He was all friendly at the beginning, but started flirting recently. I never once flirted with him and always just ignored his moves, but last week he asked me out and I said no. In fact, I apologized to him to have him think that somewhere in our conversation I might have led him on. He ghosted me and I didn't think much of it. But 2 days later, he texted me again, asking me out. I told him that I already said no, to which he replied he gave me time to think it over and that I should be grateful for it. Not gonna lie, I got upset and told him to buzz off. And he got upset and called me all the names under the moon and just shamed me for it. I blocked him, but he made his friends start messing with me too. I got super frustrated and called him out on my story along with attaching the snapshot of our chats. Around 300 people saw, and one among them is placement mentor, 4th-year student. I didn't think much of it because after the story, I blocked them all and went ahead with my day. The placement head saw this kind of behavior as unacceptable and appalling, so he reported this to our department head. Apparently, in my college, this kind of behavior is labeled as harassment and punishment can lead to suspension. The department head and placement mentor called me to the DH's office to get my statement, and I did. I showed them everything. Well, he got suspended for 3 months for his behavior. He was about to get a very good internship in a government company, but since he got suspended, that internship is also gone. Our Professor P loves him, and he called me to his office to go and make another statement to DH saying that I forgive him, and there's also wrong on my part. Our DH called me, R, his parents, and 2 professors, P and Q. DH asked me if I'm willing to forgive him. This will get him off the suspension. Somewhere inside of me, I wanted to see him suffer, so I told him no. I was harassed and I want him punished. His mother berated me in front of everyone, saying that I'm the one who led him on, and I'm doing this purposefully because he's my competitor, and her son is the victim here. DH didn't listen to her and gave R his rightful punishment. Well, at least according to me. Well, now our internship started, and few of my friends said I took it too far. He just called me names while texting, and I got him suspended for that. Some of my other classmates called me a bully and a jerk for ruining his bright future, and Professor P called me outside the class today and told me that he's extremely disappointed in me, and it's because of people like me, potential careers are ruined. This actually made me cry, and I'm rethinking whether what I did was actually extreme. So Reddit, am I the jerk? Not the jerk. Well done to your mentor and DH for stamping out this behavior. You should raise a complaint against Professor P, whose behavior is appalling. It wasn't you that affected R's career, it was R with his harassing behavior. But I can see you might not want to make this last any longer than it already has. OP. I do want to complain about this professor, but I'm honestly very scared now. I'm doing my internship, and I'm scared he might try to do something. He's one among the major professors in our department, and his subject is mandatory. Unfortunately, I don't have many friends to support me either. Am I the jerk for telling my sister she's adopted? I, male 22, have a sister, female 14, Cassie. Our parents adopted Cassie when I was 8 and she was 5 months old. They wanted to have a second kid, but mom wasn't able to get pregnant again. Of course, at the beginning, I wasn't very fond of having a younger sibling. But as for now, I love her deeply, and despite our age difference, I've got good contact with her, or at least I assume so. She's actually pretty funny to hang out with. We never really talked about her being adopted, and I never heard my parents talking about that with her. However, since she's 14 already, I assume they talked to her about the issue, especially since Cassie doesn't resemble neither me nor my parents. She has a tad similar hair color to mom's, but that's it. To be honest, I never really thought about it. Anyway, a few weeks ago, my sister came to me and straightforward said, "I'm adopted, right?" I was dumbstruck, as I was sure she knew it already. However, I asked her, why does she think so? She explained to me that she was thinking about that for some time, mainly because of how she looks different than the rest of the family, and how she got almost sure after biology class when they talked about genetics, and she realized she has attached earlobes while the rest of us don't. As I said, she's a smart one. So I told her the truth. I also told her that it doesn't change anything and she'll always be my little sister, as well as our parents' daughter. And actually, she was like, "Duh, I don't doubt it. I just wanted to know if I'm right about the adoption." I wasn't sure if I did the right thing, but she's 14 already, and she was the one asking, so it didn't feel right to lie to her. Anyway, when our dad came back home, she simply told him she knows the truth. She also mentioned she knows from me, and asked why didn't they tell her. In my opinion, she didn't seem angry or sad, and asked rather out of curiosity. Dad was pretty cool about the whole ordeal, told her they wanted to tell her when she turns 18. In our country, that's when you reach adulthood. She seemingly accepted it, and that was it. Our mom, however, went fully hysterical upon learning that Cassie knows everything. She started crying, hyperventilating, and then shouting at me that I had no right to tell this to my sister, that I just had to ruin everything for her, and that I've no saying in the matter as I'm not Cassie's parents. We tried to explain to her I wasn't even the one bringing up the topic, but she didn't listen. Now our mom doesn't talk to me, as well as part of her side of the family. They say I'm the jerk for violating our parents' rights by telling Cassie the truth. By the way, from what I gathered, it seems like Mom didn't want to tell Cassie about the adoption at all, and telling her on her 18th birthday was Dad's idea. Am I the jerk for simply answering my sister's question about adoption? Not the jerk. You weren't required to maintain your parents' lie. The advice of professionals is a person should never remember learning they are adopted. They should be told before they are capable to understand and continue to be told in age-appropriate and loving ways as they get older. So it's just as much a part of the adoptee's story that they are adopted as it's part of your story that your mother birthed you. Your parents took the gamble of Cassie figuring out an openly kept secret before they were ready to tell her. That's on them. Managers aren't allowed to tell me to use their parking space when they're off? Alright then. So this happened a good 6 years ago now. I was just starting my IT career, so I was a basic level 1 desktop engineer for a large financial company. My team consisted of me, a level 2 engineer, and 3 managers, one for data, one for people, and one overall manager. Parking in town was either expensive or impossible, and while management and supervisors got parking spaces in the huge multi-story next to the office, other staff members didn't get one and either had to pay the very expensive parking fees or park far away and walk. Being on a low entry-level salary, I opted to walk the 30 minutes into town and often got sick due to bad weather. The level 2 guy lived a 5-minute walk from the office and didn't own a car. When any of the managers were off, they offered their parking space to me so that I wouldn't have to walk, which was very nice of them and greatly appreciated as it was saving me money too. One day, I got called into HR because somebody saw me coming out of the multi-story and got jealous and asked why I get a space and they don't. This HR manager was incredibly condescending and talked to me like I was a literal kid with lines like, "Back when I was your age, I thought the world owed me everything too," which is absolutely not my attitude, but sure, go off like you know me. She said it wasn't fair on the level 2 guy because he might want the space too. She wouldn't listen when I said he didn't drive and even said to me he didn't want it after I asked if he was okay with me using the space. At the end of the day, I went into the management office and we were chatting about the day as we usually did, and I told them about the HR meeting and said they weren't allowed to let me use their space anymore. The data manager then had a genius malicious compliance suggestion. She was a very selfless soul who sacrificed much of her time to help other people, and this situation rubbed her the wrong way, and she wanted to do something out of spite. She said that whenever one of them were on holiday, they'd just tell me that their parking space will be empty for the duration, not specifically that I can use it, which is what we were told not to do from HR. So the next time they were on holiday, I parked in their space, and after a few days, somebody else got jealous and tattled to HR again. I was dragged into a meeting and asked why I was still using their space. I said that I just took a chance on an empty space I found in the multi-story. They were rented, not pay and display. She went and asked the data manager when she was back in if she said I could use the space, to which she said, "No, I just said goodbye before I went on holiday for 2 weeks." HR then told her I was in her space in her absence and asked her if she wanted to raise a complaint against me. She said, "No thanks, I wasn't using it anyway." Their hands were tied and there was nothing they could do to prevent me from using the spaces as they're allocated privately to the individuals for use even outside of office hours and only reclaimed when they leave. Am I the jerk for training her kids like dogs when Karen dumps them on me? My cousin Amy, who's 25 female, has 2 6-year-old twins and has a nasty habit of dumping them onto relatives to babysit for the entire day without any warning or regard for their time. I, 27 female, have a very strained relationship with her, but because my mom's side of the family demands that we all remain close-knit, so I have no choice to tolerate her. When she initially gave birth to them, she teased me that I'll have to take on babysitting duty from now on. I'm no good with kids, so I remarked to her that if I ever have them, I'll train them, not babysit. She brushed me off. The kids now are very destructive and loud, pulling out stuffing inside furniture, holes inside walls, smashing anything glass and porcelain, screaming louder than a fire alarm, you name it. When it was my first turn to deal with them, I immediately walked them to the store and grabbed the biggest bag of M&Ms I could find and trained them so that every time they followed my orders and behaved, they get one. If they misbehave, I get one. Soon enough, every time the kids were dumped on me, they went with my guidelines and behaved. Whenever I say sit, They sit at the table. When I say stay, they don't leave that spot, etc. 2 days ago, there was a party planned with the whole extended family. I know everything going on. Didn't want to, but mom insisted. And I grabbed the M&Ms since the twins were there. Arrived. Twins were being so destructive. An entire tray of food was spilled that all the adults had enough and yelled at Amy to control them. She threw out the same excuses of them just being kids and they'll grow out of it eventually. I shouted the twins' names and shook my M&M bag. They came running over to me and I popped 6 pieces into my mouth for their misbehavior. I told them to go clean up the mess or no candy all night. They do so. Halfway through the party, every time something similar came up or they just weren't behaving, I was the one able to calm them down. When Amy saw what I was doing, she got angry and started yelling at me about how our kids aren't animals and that I shouldn't be giving them so much candy anyway. I told her that I'm their aunt, not their parent. Why am I the one disciplining them? Isn't that her job? She screamed the same argument at me, and since she's their mother, to stop giving them candy. One of the twins overheard and went crazy, dashed straight into the kitchen and started shattering anything they could get their hands on, shouting over and over that he wants candy. His twin joined him soon after. I repeated that she's their mother and just sat in the living room watching it all unfold. In the end, Amy blamed me for them turning out this way. The other relatives she dumped them on, a majority, disagreed. But when I told a friend about the situation, he told me the training I did can really mess them up mentally later in life. So, am I the jerk? Karen destroys my son's car. I press charges. I have a 17-year-old son who has a girlfriend and an ex. My son also has a car. I think you can see where this is going. My son dumped his ex-girlfriend because he began to have feelings for another girl. He spoke to me and I made sure to tell him to dump her lightly and not to hurt her feelings before trying things out with the other girl. He did, telling ex why she was being dumped. Obviously, the ex was not happy. She ended up keying my son's car. I'm talking to the point where it is completely messed up. She carved my son's new girlfriend's name onto the doors and called her names. She also drew a man who looked goofy and labeled him my son's name. She also broke one of the windows and poured a soft drink into it. I came home as she's pouring in the soft drink and immediately called the cops. The ex got arrested and had to pay bail. I'm feeling like pressing charges because it's my son's first car and we don't want to spend much money on a new car. The ex's mother came to my house and was full on screaming about how I'm a monster for calling the cops on our daughter and how my son cheated and deserved to have his car ruined. I don't feel the slightest bit bad for pressing charges and ruining this girl's life because she's acting like a complete psycho. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. As much as people like to think so, being cheated on or dumped is not an excuse to damage people's property. Not the jerk. If she doesn't face repercussions while she's young, how will this woman learn that it's not okay to vandalize someone else's belongings? Also, her mom is part of the problem. Well, what would you do in this situation? Would you press charges or not? Please let us know. Atta girl, Karen. There's no better way to get vengeance on a man who's broken your heart than by destroying his car. Unless it's a DeLorean. Why don't you ask someone who works here? The time I was a jerk. This is an old story from about 20 or so years ago. I stopped at Costco on the way home from work. I just came in looking for some electronics or whatnot, and so wasn't pushing a cart. And while in the electronics section, this older woman sees me looking over some item, and I can see she's interested in an item shelved near the one I'm looking at. I don't even remember what the items were. Anyway, she turns and asks me some very specific questions about the item she's looking at. I looked up at her and simply answered, "Sorry, I have no idea." A few minutes later, at the other end of the same aisle, this same lady comes up to me with some other item in her hands and asks me, "Do you know blah 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 about this?" Again, it was an item that I had no idea about. And at this point, I'm mildly annoyed and just answered, "Nope," and turned to go browse the next aisle over. It's worthwhile, I think, at this point in the story to explain that I was working in northern New Jersey, basically a suburb of New York City, in a fairly stressful job, and one of the reasons I had even stopped at Costco was that my 12-mile ride home was mired in terrible traffic. Rather than spend the next 30 minutes trying to go the last 6 miles home, I pulled into the Costco I was about to crawl past, figuring I'd do a little shopping and let some of the traffic clear out while I did so. So I started this whole experience wound a little tightly. On top of that, this was when I was in my early 30s or late 20s. I was a pretty big jerk back then. I have mellowed since, and partly due to this experience. Anyway, moving on. 5 minutes later, I'm nerding out over whatever thing I was looking at in the next aisle, and the woman comes around the corner from the other aisle where I'd left her, specifically walking past other customers to come to ask me a third question about something that I had no idea about. By now, I'm pretty annoyed. It's clear to me that she's not flirting with me or anything like that, and I cannot understand why she keeps coming to bug me about these things when all I want to do is just waste a few minutes out of traffic. In all honesty, if I'd had any answers for her, I would likely have given them to her, but I didn't have those answers. In reply to her question, I gave her a crappy look, and in a very condescending voice I said, "I have no idea, but maybe you ought to ask someone who works here," and made an overly dramatic gesture with my hands pointing towards one of the employees rounding the corner at the edge of the electronics section about 20 feet away. The woman looked at me, somewhat offended, and didn't say another word. I didn't give a darn. Why couldn't this lady leave me to my nerding out? I left the electronics section and wandered off, and after another 20 or so minutes of walking around and just avoiding traffic, picked up some grocery item or other and walked to the cashier line to pay for it. As my turn came up to pay, I pulled out my wallet looking for my membership card and could not find it. I knew I had to show it to get into the store and quickly checked all my pant pockets. No card. The cashier smiles at me and points to my chest. I looked where she was pointing, and in a split second I realized, maybe not for the first time ever, that I was a giant jerk. So my employer had access control on all buildings, and you scanned your employee ID at the door of any of these buildings to enter. Employees were also obliged to display their IDs at all times while on work property. Many people wore the badge attached to one of those retractable cards that you clip to your belt. Some wore their badge on a loop of ribbon around their neck, and others, like myself, wore their badge in a transparent pouch that was designed to clip onto a shirt or jacket pocket. My employer also required business attire, so on my way home from work, I was dressed in leather-soled shoes, pleated dress pants, a white button-down shirt, and a tie. Left the jacket in the car for the trip to Costco. Apparently, I also left my work ID badge holder still clipped to my shirt pocket. At that point in time, it would not have been unusual for me to go in and out of buildings at work a dozen or more times on any given day. After a year or so, it had become a well-practiced and unthinking motion for me to grab my work ID from the badge holder that held it on my shirt pocket, flash it to the door sensor, and just slip it back into the pocket on the holder as I entered a building. Apparently, when I pulled my Costco ID out of my wallet to get into the store, I unthinkingly placed it in the badge holder, since I had forgotten to take that off and leave it in my car with my jacket instead of back into my wallet. I had been walking around the store looking like a manager, with a badge displaying the Costco logo prominently in bright red letters right on my chest. As all of this realization came to me in the second or two after the cashier pointed out my Costco ID card I was wearing, my face went a little pale and she asked me if I was okay. I mumbled something about feeling dumb and this being a habit from work as I paid for my stuff. I hurried out of the store, hoping I didn't see the woman who had been asking me questions. It began to dawn on me that if I weren't such a jerk coward, I'd go and find that woman, explain to her what happened, and apologize for being so rude. Instead, I just left the store in shame, feeling about 2 inches tall. My Karen sister keeps using me for money, but I've had enough. I, 34 female, am the eldest of 9 siblings. My sister, Sarah, 24 fake name, and I aren't close. I love all of my siblings, and I'm close with all of them except for her. Growing up, she wouldn't introduce me to her friends and would refuse to acknowledge me at family gatherings over the years. In short, she was distant with me, but not my other siblings. After I moved out of my parents' house, Sarah and I grew even further apart and didn't see each other except at family functions. She would ignore my attempts at reaching out and/or including her on anything that my other siblings and I did together. She didn't come to my wedding and didn't even know that I had gotten divorced until 2 years later. She refused to accept my requests to add her on socials and never responded to my calls or texts. It hurt, but I didn't want to push, thinking that she might eventually come around, so long as I kept the door open. A year ago, she finally accepted my social media request and sent me a DM. It started out as just a, "Hey sis, how are you?" After some awkward small talk, I learned that she's not doing well financially due to her boyfriend losing his job. She asked me if I could lend her some money as she was short for groceries. I agreed and told her that she didn't have to pay me back. I sent what she asked for and a bit extra. She thanked me and asked if we could visit for a proper catch-up. I agreed and we set it up. The visit came and went, and she didn't show up or answer my calls or texts. I assumed that something came up and texted that she let me know when we could reschedule. 2 days later, she DM'd me saying her cell phone had been cut off for non-payment. She asked for help to get it reconnected and said she'd pay me back when she could. I agreed and sent it to her. A few days later, and she asked for more money. I sent her the money again, but told her that I can't send anything else until she pays me back because I didn't have any more that I could spare. I felt like I'd been used. Then one day she asked for cab fare. I said that I'd pick her up and drive her myself. She got angry and accused me of not trusting her. She blasted me on the family group chat, saying that I was refusing to help her and that I was selfish. Sarah recently posted something about how she loves her family and how much they mean to her. She tagged all of my other siblings except for me. 5 minutes later, she sent me a text asking me for money for diapers, and I lost it. I asked her why she only ever contacts me when she wants money and that I was feeling used. She denied it and said she was angry that I could accuse her of such a thing. I sent her screenshots to prove it. She said, "Just forget it then." I tried to apologize for being rude, and she ignored me. A few days ago, she asked for help paying for rent and offered to repay the loans as soon as she could. I could help, but I don't want to. I feel like I'm being used. It hurts that she only ever contacts me when she wants money. So, am I the jerk? Not the jerk. Why do you feel bad for accurately calling out her using you? Totally not the jerk. Please stop funding her life. You're so desperate for a relationship with her that you're allowing her to manipulate you into giving her money. Don't fall for that crap. Not the jerk. Sibling or not, I would not be reaching into my pockets for someone who only contacts me when they want money and clearly is not interested in a relationship. Whatever her reasons for disliking you, Sarah doesn't seem like a nice person. Is she like this with your other siblings? Is she hitting them up for money too? Would your siblings have any idea why she's like this with you? You're the jerk. You sound just like my brother, to be honest. From what you're telling us, it sounds like you can easily afford to help out your sister, but are just choosing not to. Not everyone in life is handed out a comfy 6-figure salary. Those of you who have this level of privilege should really stop being so stingy with your hoards of money. Well, what would you do in this situation? Would you keep giving your sister money or not? Please let us know. Bruh, how much you want to bet that last comment was the sister in disguise? Am I the jerk for not boarding my dog for Thanksgiving? I, 27 male, have a 2-year-old Doberman Pinscher that is super sweet and just loves to snuggle with anyone that he meets. I adopted him as a puppy, and some of my family was not thrilled that he was a Doberman. The first time my parents, sister, and brother met him was at a barbecue. My sister and brother made comments about how he was going to grow up aggressive and not be good around kids. He is not aggressive at all and is a huge baby that loves to lick people. Thanksgiving is next week, and some family members are coming in from other states. They're flying in on Monday and depart on Saturday. I currently am living in my grandfather's cabin that he left to me when he passed. It has 3 bedrooms that are unoccupied. My uncle and aunt want to stay in the cabin, but do not want my dog in the house. They suggested boarding him at the local pet lodge from Monday until Saturday. I did call and ask for pricing, and they told me that it would be very expensive. I also don't want my dog to be gone for almost an entire week in a place he's never been before. I called my aunt and told her that I was not going to board my dog in the pet lodge. This is his home, and he has every right to stay. I offered to pay a few nights for a hotel room, and my aunt was not happy. She starts yelling at me that he's just a dog, and family is more important. My parents got involved and are on my aunt's side. My sister and brother think I should board him to prevent any more problems. Am I the jerk for not boarding my dog for Thanksgiving? Not the jerk. Your home, your decision. I can't see how they get to demand anything when it's your house. Do not offer to pay for a hotel. I'm not even sure at this point I'd offer to let them stay at my house, even with my dog. The entitlement of people amazes me. There are only 3 reasons I'd say to board your dog. If someone has an allergy, a huge fear of dogs, or your dog wasn't good with company. Do not keep the peace, because this will then be expected of you every time someone wants to stay and doesn't like your dog. Again, your house and your dog. Not the jerk. I went into this thinking you were bringing your dog to someone else's house, but that isn't the case. People can't expect you to board your dog when they're staying with you. This is just insane to me. First off, you are right. Some dogs just get a bad rep. But even if he tended to be a bit more aggressive, it's still his house. Second, your family is being manipulative and controlling, saying you don't care. You shouldn't even have to pay. If they don't like to be around dogs, then they should stay somewhere else where there aren't any. That's not on you to have to pay for a hotel. You're the jerk. I would give anything to have family who actually want to spend Thanksgiving with me. You have that, but instead you're choosing your dog over them. When will people learn that animals are not as important as people are? You're the jerk so much. Edit. I didn't say pets are not important. I said they aren't as important as people are. Some of you nimwits really need to learn how to read. Now one day you don't have family who wants to spend Thanksgiving with you. Recut 20 lawns because every blade of grass needs to be the same exact height? Okay. The characters. We've got the crew. My foreman and direct boss, his name is John. We've got my coworker, L. We've got our manager, my foreman's boss, incompetent jerk. Some context. So this happened a summer ago. I'm a college student, and in the summer when I'm home, I typically work in landscaping and landscape design as a laborer. Think laying sod and bricks, building fences and decks, or cutting grass. I also live in Mississippi, so it's hot as heck and very humid in the summer. This particular summer, I was working on the landscaping side, so I was cutting grass, pulling weeds, upkeep sort of stuff. When it came time to cut grass, I was on weed eater duty. My job was to do trim work, basically cut grass the mower can't reach. The day. So this Thursday was a particularly hot one, just after a good rain, and it was excessively hot and humid. To add on to this, the job for that day was a contract place that was 20 or so houses arranged in a circle around 2 ponds, and a walking path made the humidity even higher because of the ponds and lack of airflow, tall trees around and in the place. The lots themselves weren't particularly big, but the place took 9 to 11 hours to do well, and most of the houses also had the super cranky old people in them that would complain over the most minor things. I'm talking one weed in a flower box under a bush. So we arrive at like 6:15 and get to cutting and all that good stuff. I grab my weed eater, throw my earbuds in, and do my thing. While I weed eat, I am continually walking and occasionally will bump the weed eater with my leg, raising it up a little bit and making the grass slightly uneven every so often, maybe half an inch at the most. This usually isn't noticeable, but if it happens up against a house or structure, you can tell if you look for it. So I will typically go back and try to level it out as best I can if I notice it happen. I do the whole place, front yards and backyards. We then weed the whole place from front to back. We're getting ready to pack up and head home. It's like 4 o'clock by now, when incompetent jerk comes to the job site and starts looking around. He finishes up and pulls John aside and shows him around the place, then leaves. This process took an hour or so. So myself, John, and Elle have just burnt an hour on overtime doing nothing. By this point in the week, it was typical for us to be running an overtime. John comes over to Elle and I, telling us that we missed a ton of stuff and to grab the weed eaters and a bucket. We then walk around the place and John starts pointing out groups of like 4 blades of grass that are fractions of an inch higher than the others. Barely noticeable crap, like you really gotta look for this stuff hard. Furthermore, if you try to cut some of these with a weed eater, they bend from the downwash of the spinning strings, so you risk gouging a nice 5 to 12 inch circle in the grass trying to cut like 4 blades of grass. We begin to redo the whole place, front and back, pulling small weeds here and there from under bushes and doing our best to cut the offending blades of grass. By the second house, Elle and I are complaining to John that we're hot and tired. It's like 5:30 and we know this will take us 2 more hours. John tells us he knows this is stupid and it's not his fault. He understands the stupidity and our being upset. Cue malicious compliance. Elle and I decide we're going to make sure all offending blades of grass are cut to the same height. That new height, dirt. The thing is, if you cut grass too low, it can die. We knew this, but incompetent jerk and the cranky old people wanted it the same height exactly, and that's what they were going to get. We re-walk the place and cut any grass that is against something and over the height of dirt. We also made sure to hold our weed eaters in a way that when we cut those offending grass, we're hitting the surrounding grass with the full 12-inch diameter of the weed eater, leaving a nice 12-inch circle spot that you couldn't see now, but would when the grass died in a few days. We leveled out the grass against any structure, leaving a nice gouge where walls, fences, and flower beds met the lawn. We finished around 7:30 and headed home, and didn't hear a peep the next day. The next week, the lawns had 12-inch brown circles of grass everywhere. By Tuesday, incompetent jerk talked to John about it. John just told him the offending blades had been cut as he asked, and something along the lines of it was all now uniform in height. We couldn't help that some of the grass didn't survive the new stringent height regulations. Incompetent jerk never talked to Elle, John, or myself about it again. A few notes and fallout. This wasn't the first time and wouldn't be the last time incompetent jerk came to nitpick our work at the end of a day, which would sometimes result in us having to drive across the city or walk a mile or two up the road at the end of the day to fix BS little things that weren't even messed up, adding hours to already long hot days. Though it was the last time we ever had problems at that place. We also got the satisfaction of knowing that incompetent jerk had to take the numerous calls from cranky old people about their lawns for a few weeks. These people would lose it on us, even before the incident, so I don't want to imagine what they told him. The lawns had still had pretty noticeable dead spots and scars when I left towards the end of the summer. Also, incompetent jerk saw himself as better than any of the laborers, Elle and I, and would avoid critiquing us to our faces. This is primarily because the few times he nitpicked us directly, we either told him why it was stupid or handed him our equipment and told him to do it himself, which he would then proceed to mess up. This was a common sentiment he held towards all of the crew under his supervision, and their reactions when he critiqued them were similar to ours. In the mornings at the shop, he would sometimes talk about how we needed to be more respectful to him because he was our boss, to which people would reply something about him respecting our quality work, which it was 99% of the time, not nitpicking stupid stuff, and not showing up at the end of a day to give us more dumb crap to do, such as chop down a tree and then drive off expecting us to load it up when he had an empty open-top trailer and we had a full-box truck. What we did made its way to other crews, and they carried out similar antics, which led to him getting a tough time from his bosses who held him responsible for these events. The effects of this general disdain eventually got to him so much so you could see it just by the way he carried himself and the stress on his face. Edit. Incompetent jerk was so bad at his job that he got paid less or at the same rate as the crew foreman under him while holding the title of being their boss. I know because he would complain about this too when talking to the foreman. Reply. I used to own a landscaping company, and let me tell you, people can be petty. They would call me and lose it over a pot plant that was placed a couple of inches too far back or a weed under a brush that was missed. In the beginning, I would be apologetic, but after a few months, I would just tell the client that I'm sorry, I could not service his garden anymore as I was too busy. Then they would get apologetic and backtrack pretty quickly. And on the other note, if you as boss want to tell an employee to do it better, you sure as heck must be able to do it better than the employee. Even though I had 3 teams working under me, I still would push mower with them, dig irrigation trenches, climb trees to prune, etc. That is the fastest and best way to earn your employees' respect. Also, I always took my guy's side over customers and have walked off a few jobs and told customers to buzz off after they were condescending to my guys. Am I the jerk for being really honest with my manager in front of her boss? So, I've been a stay-at-home mom for several years. I worked very hard on our budget, shopping, meal prep, etc., and we were okay. We recently became empty nesters. The last one moved out, pays her own bills, got a scholarship, etc. I was bored, so I decided to take one of the many grocery store jobs available at the store across the street. My intent was part-time, but they quickly moved me to a different, full-time position, which I do like and am good at it, and it pays quite a bit more. The store is short-staffed, and I've been doing my best to help, but recently my manager set me down with her boss, the witness, to have a documented discussion about how I'm not a team player because I won't help other departments, even though I'm struggling to get my own stuff done because my position should have 3 people, but it's just me. They wanted me to sign a paper acknowledging that my behavior was unacceptable. I told my manager, "You need me, I don't need you." In my previous position in management, I learned it will cost your store an average of $10,000 to hire and train a replacement. I also know you have a walk-in interviews welcome sign outside every day, and you all are stressing about how short-staffed you are and have limited applications. So no, I won't sign this. Feel free to fire me. There are 10 stores within a mile that are also offering walk-in interviews. So no, I won't sign this. You can accept that or replace me, and I really don't care if you mark me as not eligible for rehire. I'll just leave you off my resume and do just fine. Still have a job 3 days later, and everyone is acting like nothing happened. But some people are saying I'm being the jerk because the management is also struggling because they are short-staffed. Not the jerk. Management is struggling, and that's their problem. Their struggles with doing their job are not your problems to solve. Your problem is to do what you were hired to do and collect your paycheck. Do you think management would care if you were struggling? What would they do if you were? I can tell you, they would fire you. Not the jerk. Sounds like your manager was getting heat for not fulfilling her job requirements and wanted to pass the blame onto you. It's too bad you're short-staffed, but that's not your fault, and you shouldn't have to accept a write-up that has nothing to do with your performance and will only hurt you later if you're ever offered another promotion. Karen introduced herself by handing me a printout of city rules. My husband and I bought our first home in May. Our yard and our neighbors' yards are all connected. Large lots, no fences, except a little creek that runs through the backyards with bridges across it. Also, the streets are all dead ends, so we have like 7 yards back to back. We have a 4-year-old dog who is 55 pounds of golden fluff. He is protective of our property, not aggressive, just will bark if you come into our yard. Our driveway is in the back, so he generally won't stray past the driveway line to the next door neighbor's yard. We decided to add another dog to the family a couple of months later. I work really hard to train my dogs, but puppies are just puppies sometimes. The dogs are never outside without me or my husband. We don't leave them unattended. Pup was learning her yard and boundaries, which takes a minute without a fence. Anyway, our neighbors directly on both sides of us are super friendly and have dogs that run around too. Diagonal to our backyard, about 1/2 an acre away, is this older couple that is always gardening. They have never waved or said hi or anything. One day I'm sitting out back with my dogs and my cousin and her dog. We played some fetch and started a fire going in the fire pit. All of a sudden, this old couple walked from around the house and down our driveway. Our big dog is barking at them, so I'm trying to quiet him. The couple just proceeds to hand me a printed out city ordinance paper and tells me my dogs are running at large and they will call the city to have them taken away. It clearly states on the paper that a dog is not deemed running at large if it A. is in the owner's yard, B. has permission to be in a neighboring yard, aka our next door neighbors don't care, and a few other things, of which we aren't violating. We are young and definitely not the fanciest of the neighbors, but we care deeply to respect and have a good relationship with the families on our block. Additionally, I'm a very easygoing person to talk to, so I tell them that the other 4 dogs run around and come to our yard, so are you going to report them? They said, "We just spoke to your next door neighbors and they hate your dogs." We talk to the next door neighbors every day. Their dog frequents our yard for visits, so I told the couple, if they, next door, have an issue with me or my dogs, they're welcome to come discuss it with me themselves. We have literally asked them multiple times if it's cool if our dogs fetch occasionally in their yard, and they don't care. They continue to argue with me about the ordinances, and I'm trying to politely tell them I am not breaking any codes, and if they want to call the city, they can go ahead and do that. Basically, it takes forever for the conversation to get to the actual issue, which turns out is that they have a little pond in their backyard, and one time my pup got near their pond. I tell them, "I'm so sorry my dog got near your pond. I will make sure she doesn't go to your yard again." They won't leave my driveway and continue to spew off complaints about it. I'm starting to get a little shaky. I don't care for unnecessary conflict, and I was getting angry, which I don't often. I'm just saying over and over again that I'm sorry the puppy came near their pond. They then tell me that my big dog was out all night barking, and they're going to complain to the city about it. He is my shadow, literally doesn't leave my side, and my dogs are never out at night barking. I was in bed with the dogs by 8:30 that particular evening, which I tell the couple. Finally, I'm just like, call the city, I don't care, but you need to leave my property. My dog follows them, barking at them to the edge of my driveway, and then stops and turns around when he hits the neighbor's yard. I was so annoyed, I was just telling him, "Good boy," as he barked them away. The thing that really irked me about this situation was that they never introduced themselves. Literally, they could have just come over and said, "Hey, we're your neighbors, and your puppy got near our pond. Can you make sure she doesn't do that again?" Simple. I checked in with the next door neighbors about it, and they said it took about 15 years to have a pleasant conversation with this couple. When I take the dogs out now and they're gardening, they just glare at me. But maybe in 15 years, well, they'll probably be dead and gone. Am I the jerk for refusing baby items from another pregnant family member? My husband and I, both 30, are expecting our first child at the end of this year. A month after we announced our pregnancy, my husband's 17-year-old cousin announces hers. This is not a jealousy issue. If anything, her pregnancy has taken us out of the spotlight of important family happenings to our relief. We are quiet people, and while we are excited and hopeful, this is our first baby to make it this far after several miscarriages, so we're trying to stay calm through this, just in case. Us being the way we are, we do not do baby showers. Thanks to lockdown, I have a solid excuse to avoid them. We do not ask for gifts. We enjoy being able to quietly take care of ourselves. The cousin has been going on about her pregnancy as many people do, having family gatherings, baby showers with over 30 people, etc., and has received a lot of gifts. This is where the issue takes place. My mother-in-law calls every couple of days to tell me that the cousin has an extra tub or extra boxes of diapers, etc., and that she wants to give them to me. I want what I picked out for my baby, not someone else's leftovers. I have the means to buy my son what I want him to have, and if I needed someone else's charity to raise a kid, I would not have gotten pregnant in the first place. I've been politely turning these gifts down. Knowing the way my mother-in-law is, I will eventually have to be firm and tell her how I feel. You do not want to hear about the guilt trip she put me through after I denied her to throw us a baby shower. If I say to her what I said above about the leftover gifts, will I be the jerk? Edit. Whoa, guys, thank you. You really made me see how entitled and jerky I sound. Pregnancy hormones are something else, and I truly believed that what I said above was perfectly normal. I will accept the gifts. I will be more open towards my in-laws, and I will try to get closer to his cousin and help her in any way she needs. My son needs his family, and he's not going to have one if I let my antisocial behavior get in the way. I rarely post to Reddit, and I thought for a long time before I posted to this sub. I expected no one to respond. When I opened up my inbox to see 30 strangers calling me names, it really helped me get that ego in check. Thank you. My Karen wife is making me return the $600 gift I bought my mom for Christmas. To start, I want to mention that unlike my wife, I have a very good relationship with mom. And because my siblings can always afford pricey gifts for mom, this year I decided to gift her something nice and expensive for once on Christmas. Though I'm currently unemployed, but I work for the past few months and my wife and I have a joint account. The problem began when my wife found out I purchased a $600 necklace for my mom to gift her on Christmas using our joint account. She went off on me, saying I should have told her and shouldn't have taken money from our joint account that she uses to pay the bills and rent, especially now that we're struggling. I asked why should I tell her since it's for both of us, but she reminded me that despite that being true, 1, I no longer work, and 2, $600 is a lot of money and I should have consulted her. But the reasons I didn't are, 1, I feel that it's my money too and I can make purchases using our joint account, and 2, I know if I told my wife, she'd refuse to let me buy the gift solely because she can't stand my mom. She yelled at me, saying that it's her hard-earned money that I threw away and I needed to return the necklace, but I refused because mom already knows about it. She responded that this is no longer our joint account since I no longer earn money, and that if I want to gift mom expensive items, then I need to earn money. She insisted I return it, but I said no, and it escalated to me calling her bitter and controlling after she pointed out I never got her anything in this price range. She's insisting I return it and at least get a cheaper one, but I'm done being the one with the least expensive and valuable gifts to gift in my family. She's making this her hill to die on. Am I the jerk? You're the jerk. Money shared is exactly that. Shared. You're in a partnership. You can't just spend the shared money willy-nilly. And she has every right to be upset if you're using the money you both share to buy extravagant gifts for other people without talking it through first. My rule of thumb is always, if it's more than $100, discuss it. Shared finances is not a ask for forgiveness, not permission situation. Totally, you're the jerk. It's easier for you to spend someone else's hard-earned money rather than your own. I find it curious that you wait to get your mom something nice and expensive for once, when that, for once, happens to be when you're unemployed and money is tight. And you don't spend that kind of money on your own wife? Why would you think she'd be okay with you making such a large purchase using the money she made for someone you claim she hates? Again, when money is tight. I'm sure if you had gone and picked up a necessity or even a $25 gift card for your mom, that your wife would have had a better reaction. Maybe instead of shopping for a gift for your mom that didn't need to be bought this year, you could have been shopping for a job. You treated money meant for bills and necessities as your personal little rainy day fund, and you didn't even think about your wife first. Why did you marry her if you were going to put your mom above her? You're unbelievable. Not the jerk. People don't realize what marriage actually means anymore. Let me spell it out for you. A joint account belongs to both of you, which means no, you do not need her permission or anyone else's to use it. I can only imagine if the roles were reversed, how all these Redditors would be telling her she's wonderful for buying a gift like that, then telling her to leave you because you are too controlling. But hey, that's Reddit for you. Take my advice. Get out while you can and find a partner who respects the sanctimony of marriage. I've been in your shoes before, and it destroyed my mental health. It got to the point where my, at the time, wife was trying to limit the number of hours I could play video games each day. We fought about it nonstop, and I admit I did some things that I'm not proud of. I just don't want you to end up in the kind of position I was. Nobody deserves it. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his wife? Please let us know. I wonder if that last commenter was for the Alliance or for the Horde. World of Warcraft for the win. Am I the jerk for walking out of a restaurant twice after my wife made me the third wheel again? I, 30 male, my wife, 29 female, planned a date night tonight as our kids were at my in-laws. We hadn't decided where to go, and while driving, my wife asked me where to go. I told her that I don't care, as long as it's somewhere that her coworkers don't work, because my wife works in the restaurant industry and knows a lot of people that work at the places near us. This turns into the majority of our dates being her talking with them instead of me. So I tell my wife, as long as I'm not made into a third wheel again this time, I'll be happy. She picks a Tex-Mex place and says, I don't know anyone that works there. As soon as we walk into the restaurant, someone shouts my wife's name and a woman comes over to us and tells us she'll take us. Turns out, this woman is an ex-coworker. We sit at our table, and my wife and her are already talking and gossiping about the things going on at their previous jobs. I wasn't mad at this point because I know that they want to catch up. After several minutes of this, she left to go get our drinks, and my wife apologizes and says that she had no idea that she worked there. A few minutes later, she comes back with our drinks and her boyfriend, who is also an ex-coworker of my wife's, and they proceed to talk and ignore me again. Then after taking our food orders, she stays at the table and they talk for another 5 to 7 minutes instead of putting our order in. I try to join in and I'm ignored again. When she goes to put the order in, I tell my wife, I asked for you not to do this one thing tonight. She proceeds to tell me that she didn't want to be rude and it's just small talk. I tell her that I tried to join in and they ignored me. She tells me that they didn't ignore me, they just didn't hear me. I was speaking as loud as they were. She then asks me, what do you want me to do? Tell her to buzz off? I said, no. Politely tell her that you are on a date with your husband and we'd like to spend some time together. She tells me that this is rude and it's basically the same as telling her to buzz off. She tells me to stop being in a bad mood because we're alone now and that I'm the only one ruining the night. I said, fine then, I'll remove myself, and got up and walked out of the restaurant. I stood outside several minutes until she called and begged me to come inside. There were a few issues with my meal, which turned into another argument, with her saying nothing can be right because I'm in a bad mood because she spoke to someone. I told her that I refused to let her make me the jerk in this situation. She says that I'm being controlling and this is what normal people do and that I'm being psychotic. I ask her for the keys so I can go out to the car and cool off. She tells me no. So I tell her I'm going to walk home and get up to leave. She calls me 20 minutes later, asks where I am, and comes to pick me up. This turned into another giant fight, and her saying she's going to stay the night at her parents, and that this is why her friends think I'm the jerk. So, am I the jerk? Edit. I forgot to mention that our server's boyfriend, that also works at the restaurant and knows my wife, also approached the table and spoke to my wife. However, that was a 2-minute conversation. Then he left and didn't bother us again. Not the jerk. You made it clear that this was a sore spot, and your wife chose to be rude to you rather than risk coming across as rude to her friends. She easily could have said, "It's so great to see you guys, but this is a rare night without the kids for us, so let's catch up later." That would have been considerate of everyone. She prioritized her friends over you. Everyone sucks here. This is going to cost me some karma, but hear me out. You guys have a big communication problem. Throughout your interaction, it is clear that your wife's behavior and responses makes you feel your opinion and voice aren't important. It's a valid and common feeling in relationships, and you should not be ashamed of it at all. Your wife, on the other hand, seems to feel your request was unreasonable and a way to control her. It's also a valid and common feeling in relationships. One partner makes repeated pleas to be heard, and the other feels controlled and feed into it by refusing to cooperate, creating a self-feeding loop. The more you ask to be heard, the more she feels controlled and refuses to hear. None of these feelings make either of you the jerk. What does is the way you both respond to conflict. She builds a wall of denial, convincing herself she satisfied your demand within reason, and justifying any further request as you being unreasonable. She is the jerk for that. You, in response, decide to walk out on her. Because you are ignored, you decide to sabotage the already sinking ship. Most people don't understand that one, but walking out as a way of protest is damaging to the relationship. Walking away should be done to collect yourself and come back later to resolve the conflict. What you achieve by walking out is a bigger, more painful conflict than it already was, making you the jerk as well. You guys need to work on communication better. You love her and therefore yearn to be valued by her in such conversations. And since she gladly introduces you to everyone she knows, she loves you and wants you to be there with her. But somewhere along the way, you guys got lost and end up fighting over tangled up emotional responses. You're the jerk. You got so upset that your wife was chatting to a friend that you stormed outside to pout like a child. After you went back in, you had problems with your food and then got so upset you wanted to leave and walk home? This is pretty childish behavior. It seems your wife legitimately didn't know that her former colleagues worked here, and you never explained to the colleague that you were on a date night and would appreciate some privacy. And you needed to be the one to say that, because it is your wife's industry. If your wife said it and it was taken rudely, it could affect her reputation. If you said it, worst case, they might think your wife is married to a jerk, but at least it wouldn't affect her. But in general, going outside to pout because your wife is talking to someone else and you feel ignored just seems like something a child would do, not a grown man. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his wife? Please let us know. I would have been like, "Excuse me, we're on a date night. Can you, stop bothering us?" Entitled parent refuses to accept I'm blind. You know, it's actually sad how often this sort of thing happens. I mean, being a blind girl, instances of ignorant people are daily. But entitled parents represent a certain level of infamy for me. But this one just happened, so hey, why not make myself feel better by making you guys read about my misfortune? The people involved. We've got me. We've got entitled mother. We've got security guard 1 and security guard 2. So since my parents are more at risk of getting sick, I've been going grocery shopping alone more and more often during the lockdown. Yesterday was one of these cases. Grocery shopping is a more involved process for a blind person. I have to ask a staff member to assist me. I also have my guide dog, Gumbo, inside with me. The dog in itself increases the instances of bad experiences. Now, during my shopping, I always get a wide array of reactions to my dog, but one in particular occurred towards the end of my shopping. I heard loud footsteps, followed by the loud screech of, "That doggy is so cute. Can I pet him?" It was obviously a little kid by the voice, so I prepared myself before responding that no, my dog cannot be touched due to him being a guide dog. Surprisingly, the kid didn't act entitled, but seemed surprised and excited about a dog having a job. She, I believe it was a she, asked me a few questions and then left. I thought nothing of it and continued with my shopping. After I finished, I decided to stop by the food court on the way out for some lunch, so I went and made my way across the supermarket. I ordered my food, sat down, and waited. But by some cosmic gracing of bad luck, that is the exact moment that this kid and their parent decided to walk close by. I heard the kid tell their mother about what I told her, about how my dog is working as a guide dog, that I'm blind and use him to get around, etc. The mother isn't really saying anything, but I can sort of tell by her tone and the few words she does say that she has seen some issue with what her daughter was told. I decided to listen in, and after the daughter finished her babbling, the mother came up to me. Now, as I said, people coming up to me is super common. I thought nothing much of it. However, the first words out of her mouth were, "Why did you tell my daughter you're blind?" Her tone was very harsh, very accusatory. I immediately knew what was coming, but as usual, I put on a smile. Me, because I am blind. Your daughter asked me about my dog, so I explained what guide dogs are and why we use them. You're not blind? Excuse me? The straight-shooting words caught me off guard. Karen. You're not blind. My cousin is blind, so I know what a blind person is like. You shouldn't lie about that. I think you should let my daughter pet the dog. She likes dogs. It's pretty crappy to refuse a child something like that. My hackles rose slightly. Me. Well, ma'am, not all blind people are the same. Just because you know a single blind person doesn't mean you know how all blind people are. And as I already explained, your daughter can't pet my dog due to him being a seeing eye dog. Karen. Why are you lying? Your eyes are completely fine. You're using a phone. Don't say you're blind if you're gonna show you're not at the same time. Why would you lie about this? Me. Excuse me, but I am not lying. My eyes looking fine have nothing to do with anything. Not every blind person's eyes look the same. Look, you're stressing me out. I'd rather you just left me alone. Karen. My daughter wants to pet your dog. She's been well behaved all throughout today, and it's more than reasonable to let her pet the dog. Me. I said no. I don't know why you can't just accept my answer. You said no using that BS excuse. You're honestly starting to tick me off. I don't know who you think you are, but I happen to work for... I can't actually remember what she said. And if you don't stop it, I'll get security to throw you and your fake guide dog out of here. Now I'm sure you get the picture. This went on for a good 5 minutes of her getting progressively more and more angry at the fact I wouldn't let her daughter pet my dog. The daughter was actually silent throughout the whole thing. I don't really think she even cared that much. The entitled mom, however, was another story. Eventually, she screamed out, "That's it! I'm going to get security. If you're smart, you'll be gone by the time I get back, or you'll regret it." I snorted at her small fit and heard her huff and storm off. By that time, my food had arrived, so I started eating. I didn't really believe she'd go to get security, but with entitled parents, you cannot be sure. About 5 or so minutes went by of me eating. I was enjoying my fries, browsing Reddit in bliss, but of course, she returned. I heard her stupid stomping from like 15 feet away, and she was raging on to an apparent security guard. Karen. Look, that's her. You see? She's sitting there with a dog. She says it's a guide dog, but she's not blind. You have to kick her out. Dogs aren't allowed. I sighed and removed an earbud to prepare for the incoming ordeal. A deep male voice sounded from a few feet in front of me. He sounded rather harassed. Security guard 1. Miss, is this a service dog? Yes, it is. He's a seeing eye dog. I'm allowed to take him in here. I have a copy of the appropriate law if you need it. Security guard. No, that's fine. I know service dogs are allowed. This woman is saying you aren't disabled though. Is that true? Me. No, she's just angry I didn't let her daughter touch my dog. I honestly don't know why she cares. Because you're a liar. I told you, I have a blind cousin. Don't try to tell me I don't understand blind people, because I do. Me. I directed my attention to the security guard. I've tried to explain to her that one blind person doesn't represent all blind people, but she doesn't seem to get it. Could you please ask her to leave me alone? I just want to eat in peace. Security guard. So, you are blind? Me. Yes, I am. Security guard. Can you prove it in any way? Me. No. How could I do that? And why? Security guard. Well, it's just that she's saying one thing and you're saying another thing. I don't exactly know who to believe. But yeah, I see how proving you're blind doesn't really work. He spoke to the woman. Why is it exactly that you think she's lying? Entitled mom. Are you serious? Are you thick? Look at her eyes. They're not white or cloudy like blind people's are. She's literally looking at a phone. Security guard spoke to me. What's your response? Me. Maybe her cousin has those eye symptoms, But not every blind person does. Those symptoms are caused by diseases like cataracts, which I don't have. As for the phone, devices have been accessible to the blind for years. I find it surprising she has a cousin who is blind and doesn't know that.
No, I saw you look at the phone. You were looking at it.
Me. I have basic light perception. I can detect light. I direct my eyes to it out of habit because that's where my hands are occupied. Look, it's not my job to educate you on what you don't know. I spoke to the guard. Please, just ask her to leave me alone. I don't care if she doesn't believe me. You don't need to stand here and mediate a back and forth as if we're going to agree. I'd just like her to stop talking to me and leave me in peace. I'm feeling extremely harassed. Security guard. Yeah, I get that. It's just that I can't know for sure if you're blind, so she might have a valid point. Me. What? That applies to every blind person. How can anyone prove that? If she has no reasons for me lying, then shouldn't you give me the benefit of the doubt? Security guard. I don't know. She said her cousin is blind. She probably knows something about it. Me. I paused for a second. Wow. I'm not even going to bother. Look, if you're not going to get her away from me, then I'm just going to leave. Thanks for failing to protect a disabled patron. I stood up to leave, my dog getting up to guide me. I took a few steps and suddenly felt someone grab hold of my harness handle tightly and pulled me to a stop. Karen.
Wait! I said I wanted you to let my daughter pet the dog. Then you can leave.
Me. No! Get off my harness! Get off! Now understand, grabbing my harness is akin to someone taking away your eyes. She was impeding my means of navigating, so I panicked. This has only happened to me once before, and I panicked then too. I attempted to pull my harness handle back, all the while screaming, "Get off! Let go! Help!" And her screaming in my ear about. Actually, I wasn't exactly listening, as I was too busy screaming. But I assume it had to do something with her daughter. The security guard was fumbling around fairly uselessly. Eventually, another security guard hurried over. I heard him bark out, "Security guard 2. What's going on?" Me. She's taking my guide dog. Help me. She won't let go.
No, she's supposed to let my daughter pet her dog. He said so.
I assume she pointed to the guard. The guard didn't respond, but the way the conversation went, it seemed like he non-verbally indicated that he hadn't said that. Security guard 2. Miss, let go of the lady's dog right now, or I'll escort you out.
No, she's not blind. The dog isn't real. Don't just jump in and assume you know what's going on.
Me. I had calmed slightly, so I could speak in a more coherent manner. Please just get her off of me. I want to leave. I don't feel safe. Let me leave. Security guard 2. Hey, you're all right, miss. Everything's gonna be fine. I then felt the woman's hand being forcibly removed from the harness handle. As soon as I was free, I immediately commanded Gumbo to lead me to the exit. We walked quickly. I heard the woman screeching loudly behind me, the man shouting, "Calm down, just stop screaming." I was still somewhat panicked, but I was able to calm myself down as I hurried towards the exit. It was so chaotic, I very nearly forgot my shopping where I left it at customer services, because I didn't want to have it around me in the food court where it could be snatched. I left, called a taxi, and came home. It has really stuck with me for the last couple days, but the worst part is that these types of interactions are an almost daily occurrence. Blind people are the targets of constant harassment in public. This woman just went farther by physically assaulting me. I know I could have and should have gotten her arrested, but honestly, I was just so panicked, I wanted out of the situation ASAP. So why am I telling this story? In short, spreading awareness. It's important for people to know more about the blind experience and what blind people have to deal with. It's also super important to say, if you're ever a witness to a situation like I just described, intervene. Had that second guard not intervened for me, the situation would have been a lot worse. So I'd appreciate any upvotes on this post to help spread more awareness. And I didn't even get to finish my fries. Edit. Wow, I posted this, went to bed, and woke up with 3,500 upvotes. Nuts. Thanks so much for making this story reach so many people and helping more people understand the blind experience. Internet cookies for all of you. Am I the jerk for taking away my daughter's Thanksgiving present because she refused to eat what my wife cooked? I'm in my 40s. I'm a father of 2 kids, a son who's 14 and a daughter who's 16. I recently got married to my wife, Molly, who is a great cook, and she's been cooking for me and the kids for the past few months. However, my daughter doesn't like all the meals Molly cooks and sometimes cooks her own dinners. Molly, as a result, would get hurt thinking her food isn't good enough. She confided in me about how much it bothers her to see my daughter decline her food and cook by herself. I've talked to my daughter to address the issue, and she said she appreciates Molly's cooking, but naturally cannot be expected to eat everything she cooks. I asked her to be more considerate and try to take a few bites here and there whenever Molly cooks to avoid conflict since she's very sensitive. My daughter just nodded, and I thought that was the end of it. Last night I got home from a dinner meeting with a few coworkers and found Molly arguing with my daughter. I asked what's going on, and Molly told me my daughter said no to dinner she cooked and went into the kitchen to prepare her own dinner as if Molly's food was less than. I asked my daughter to come out of the kitchen and please sit at the table and eat at least some of her stepmom's cooking, but she refused, saying she's old enough not to eat food she doesn't like and pretend to like it just because I wanted her to appease her stepmom. I told her she was acting rude and had her turn the oven off and told her no cooking for her tonight and asked her to go to her room to think about this encounter, then come back to talk, but she started arguing. That is when I punished her by taking away her Thanksgiving gift that her mom left with me. We both paid for it, and she started crying, saying it was too much and that she didn't understand why she was being punished. Again, I asked her to go to her room to cool off, but she called my in-laws, her aunt and uncle, who picked a huge argument with me over the phone, saying my daughter is old enough to cook her own meals and my wife should get over herself and stop picking on my daughter. But Molly explained she just wants to make sure my daughter eats well and that she cares, otherwise it wouldn't hurt so bad. My in-laws told me to back out of the punishment, but in my opinion, this was more than an issue about dinner, and I refused to let them intervene and hung up. My daughter has been completely silent and refuses to come downstairs. To clarify, the gift, which is an iPhone, was supposed to be for my daughter's birthday 2 months ago, but due to circumstances we couldn't celebrate nor have time to get her a gift, so her mom wanted her to have it on Thanksgiving. You're the jerk. If she is cooking her own food she likes better, who cares? Your new wife sounds like a control freak. It's about more than dinner. You brought a new wife into the house, and suddenly she gets to control what your nearly adult daughter eats? It would be different if your daughter demanded fast food, but if she's cooking for herself, you and your wife need to get over yourselves. You're the jerk, as that gift was not only from you, but her mother as well. Why is it such a big deal that she eat everything your wife cooks? Sounds like something else is going on here. Is your daughter a kind, thoughtful person to her stepmom? Is your wife a kind and thoughtful person to your daughter? Am I the jerk for letting my daughter bring a different toy? I, 28 female, have a daughter who just turned 6 and has just gone to her very first birthday party. The party was one of those theme parties, Barbie themed, and so all the girls were told to bring their favorite Barbie doll with them and they'd do a bunch of activities with the dolls. It was a really cute idea. My daughter, however, is still struggling a lot with motor skills at her age. We're working with a doctor and has trouble with smaller toys. She does have Barbies, but gets incredibly frustrated playing with them because she can't hold them properly. Knowing this, I tried calling the parents a day or two before, but they didn't pick up at all. The day of, and they still didn't respond, so I grabbed my daughter's bigger doll and a Barbie just in case, and we headed out. I also grabbed some items from the activities that were sized a bit more properly so she could still participate. The second we got to the backyard where the party was, the birthday girl's mom pulled me aside and asked me what I was doing without a Barbie. I explained my side and how she never picked up the phone. She said I was being incredibly inappropriate and that I had ruined the party by bringing a toy off-brand. We ended up staying throughout the party despite this, and there were no issues. A few kids did ask why my daughter had a different doll, but my daughter had no trouble explaining that she just couldn't hold small things well, and nobody really cared too much. Everyone had a good time, and my daughter got to participate in most of the activities, and the ones her doll couldn't fit, like the hairstyling game, her doll's head was too big for the accessories. She helped another girl or watched. Later, after I got home, I ended up with multiple messages from the birthday girl's mother telling me I was no longer invited to any other event she'd be hosting. Her daughter was sad she didn't get to have an all-Barbie party, that we shouldn't have come, and that it wasn't her problem my daughter was slow, etc. My husband was outraged having heard about all of this, but I honestly feel like I should have just not come at all after reading what she had to say. Not the jerk. This is about the mother's ego and having a picture-perfect party. If the daughter is disappointed that one of her friends needed an accommodation for a disability and received one, then it's the mother's job to educate her daughter and help her to understand. What's her mother going to do the next time her daughter wants a birthday party at a laser tag or a water park, and one of her daughter's friends has a wheelchair or uses crutches? No, sorry honey, you just need to crawl around on the floor because we just can't have someone being different here. I'm just here to play the drums. So I'm a musician. I was playing a gig at a bar. It's a casual bar in the city, so I was dressed to look good, but I wasn't wearing a tie or anything. It's casual. A friend of mine showed up, and during the set break, we both went outside to smoke and were standing to the side of the entrance. We're hanging out, chatting, and then this group shows up and I make eye contact with the woman leading them. She's walking towards me and pulls her wallet out, then hands me her ID. My friend and I glance at each other and back to her. I don't know about this, miss. This looks like a fake to me. She's completely dismayed. No, I swear it's real. It's just a really old picture and I wasn't having a good day that day. Takes the heaviest sigh. I swear it's real. My friend and I glance back at each other. We give each other a nod in agreement, so I turn back to her while all her friends are uncertain if their night's plans are about to change. I'm just here to play drums, but thanks for sharing this with me. I read her name on the ID. Jane Smith. Then I proceed to give her the ID. She asked, so, can I go in? Yeah, sure. Why would I care? Are you not the doorman? Nah, I'm just here to play those drums over there. I point inside. I'm playing a gig here tonight. I'm just on a break. Her friends lost it. She realized what just happened, started apologizing, and I told her it was totally fine and that I had a good laugh out of it. They all hung out for the music and tipped the band graciously. After the gig, we had another good laugh and went our separate ways. Karen X demands I adopt her purebred dog. In the final 2 months of our 3-year but quickly dissolving relationship, my ex bought a 2-month-old purebred Labrador Retriever, a puppy, to the tune of $1,200. For the sake of clarity, we both knew our relationship was in the end stages, but neither of us were ready to deal the final break. We talked about the dog, and I was fine with it, but she would pay for it, and everything associated with it was in her name. We also had 3 cats that I adopted from the local APL. They were all in my name, and I paid for their care and so on. The cats were absolutely terrified of the dog, which hastened the end of our relationship. The cats came with me and moved out. Overall amicable separation, but we did not keep in contact. I never asked about the dog, nor did she ask about my cats. 2 years later, she gets in touch with me and asks me to take in our dog for some time. She was moving in with her boyfriend, who I had since learned she had been seen before we broke up, and his apartment didn't allow pets. She asked that I take care of our dog until they bought a house together. I said no. She asked why. I said I didn't want to. She tried to talk about how I cared for the dog and that he was part of my family too, etc., etc. Look, I liked the dog well enough and was more than happy to take care of him while I lived with her. But I don't want a dog for any amount of time. I have 4 cats now, my own house, an unpredictable work schedule, and no desire for a dog and the increased responsibility that comes with one. I told her to look for long-term boarding kennels. She said she would never. Eventually, she straight up begged me, saying they were going to buy a home ASAP, but how long I was to look after him could be anywhere from a week to a few months. I said no, final answer. She blocked me and I went about my life. A few days ago, she unblocked me and unleashed a text barrage to the effect that I had gotten her dog taken away from her and I owed her the price she paid for him. Apparently, she surrendered him to the local APL, believing they would just hold him for her. Anyway, the dog was adopted out very quickly and unsurprisingly. A well-mannered purebred dog at the local APL? Few and far between. Why she didn't, board him somewhere is a great question. Like I said, I suggested it, but I'm also the devil, so she disregarded it immediately. Some of my family who knew her while we were together think I'm the jerk. Am I? Not the jerk. It's a shelter, not a pawn shop. You don't get your dog back from a shelter. That's common sense. My dogs are my kids, but they are pets, and pets are not subject to any kind of joint custody agreement where an ex is obligated to take them. If she couldn't afford to live in a place that allowed a pet until she could buy a house, That certainly sucks, but it's not your problem. Not the jerk. Your ex is in the wrong completely for blaming you for her choices after your breakup. In no way are you responsible. You gave her ideas to help her, which she then refused to consider. She's lashing out at you because that's far easier to do than to take responsibility for her actions. This is a problem of her own creation. Well, what would you have done in this situation? Would you have looked after the dog or not? Please let us know.
She sounds like an incompetent pet owner. I hope Doggo has a better family now.
Am I the jerk for not accepting my new neighbor? I, 38 female, am part of a group of friends in my neighborhood. We take turns hosting dinner parties between our households, 5 houses out of 15 in our neighborhood. One of our group recently moved out because her husband was cheating with his secretary. In the last month, he moved her in and is acting as if everything is normal. I'm hosting dinner this month. We're hosting Thanksgiving as none of us are able to see family this year. The husband of my friend, who's back home with her parents, otherwise she'd be invited, asked my husband, as their friends, about the plan and assumed he and his mistress would be invited. My husband said no, and that due to circumstances, none of the wives wanted them. Both him, who betrayed our friend, and his girlfriend, who was very aware of his wife and kids at home. Well, the girlfriend came by to talk to me today. She approached me right as I was getting home from work, so I'm assuming she was waiting for me. She wants to try to mend fences and build friendships with the wives of her boyfriend's friends and neighbors, as she's now part of the community. I'll admit, I was exhausted after working a 48-hour on-call shift, and I am very protective of my friends normally. I don't care to be this woman's friend. I simply said to her, I don't want to be friends with a woman that messes around with married men, and your boyfriend stopped being my friend when he destroyed his family and broke my friend's heart, and just walked into my home. My husband got a call from her boyfriend, and he was furious with me for making his girlfriend upset. My husband really doesn't like what his friend did either, and told him that he doesn't support cheating either, and understands that I don't want to continue friendship with him or his girlfriend. My friends are split. All my friends that are friends with his soon-to-be ex-wife are 100% with me, and most think I should have been harsher with my words. But other friends keep telling me that she's not the problem. The husband cheated. And while I agree with that, I also believe that this girl was aware he had a wife and young kids at home and knew the damage this would do. No, she didn't take a vow. But personally, I think it's very immoral, and it's like backstabbing another person to get involved with someone that's in a committed relationship. I don't see why I should be friends. It's not like I'm friends with the whole neighborhood to start with anyways. Not the jerk. You're not required to play nice with anyone, and the soon-to-be ex and mistress assuming that you would be okay with the replacement of your friend is naive at best and downright entitled and oblivious most likely. You probably could have said it more nicely, but most normal people would have expected that response, long shift or not. You hurt her feelings? Did he ever stop to see that he hurt more than his wife by cheating? Probably not. Actions have consequences, and he must accept that as part of his new life. Not the jerk. This guy cheated on your friend. He doesn't get invited anymore. The end. A mistress who knows she is a mistress is also totally to blame. If you were still inviting him and not the mistress, that would be messed up. But you are treating them the same. Both the cheating man and his mistress are not invited. Your friend saying he is the cheater is right, but it's not like you are only punishing her. You are cutting them both out. I don't blame you. Keep them both away from you. You're the jerk. I've been in a similar position as his new girlfriend, and let me tell you something. It's judgmental people like you that drive people to dark places. You have the opportunity to welcome this woman into your community, and instead you shun her? You have no idea what she's been through. I'm sorry your friend got her feelings hurt, but that gives you no right to treat the new girlfriend this way. You are so the jerk, and I hope they cut contact with you and your judgmental husband and live a happy life free of people like you.
Yowza!
Well, what do you think? Is OP the jerk for the way she treated the new girlfriend or not? Please let us know.
Homewreckers get no love from me, but neither do cheating jerks.
Snow shoveling drama. I'm reminded of a story that happened while I was living at home. You may enjoy it. On mobile, and names have been forgotten, so I'm just gonna make them up. This happened in the late 90s, early 2000s for reference. My dad owned a snowblower. During the wicked weather this side of the Rockies, He would use his blower to take care of the sidewalks in front of everyone on both sides of our block. Most of the families on my block were either seniors, those with small families, or younger couples that inherited their relatives' homes. Everyone knew everyone, and they understood that my dad was doing this as a courtesy. He was in his 50s and just trying to be a good neighbor. So my neighbors 2 doors down divorce and sell their house to a family from out of state. Fake name time. Picards sounds good. I know they were from a snowy state, but I don't remember where. They moved in during the late summer, close to the start of the school year. A couple months later, our state has a massive snowstorm. It would snow for nearly 24 hours for almost the entire winter. You would shovel and clear snow just to get another dump, and you'd have to keep going and going. We had something like 350% of average snowfall that month alone. So my dad is out there during the first big dump with his snowblower, just taking care of business as he's nice, and the third house down had an occupant that walked on arm crutches. He just made a path from our house to theirs. No big deal. Been taking care of this for a while now. He gets done and heads to work. He gets home late most nights, so he's not expecting anyone to be at the door as he walks in. Lo and behold, the Picards must have been watching out the window for him as they walk up to him and he opens the door.
Hey, did you shovel our walk?
Huh?
Our walk! The one that runs in front of our house.
Oh, yeah, I did your sidewalk.
Well, we're not paying you for this shoddy work you did. You sprayed our tree with snow.
My dad is out of it after a 10+ hour day, commute not included, so he's not getting what's happening. I'm sorry?
You should be. That tree is too small to handle that much snow blown on it. You need to blow it somewhere else.
As my dad was one that religiously read city bylaws, he knew the time frame for removing snow and where you could put shoveled snow. The city doesn't allow you to blow snow into the street because it messes with the plow's ability to take care of the streets. But Mr. Picard insisted that he had to blow the snow elsewhere. Knowing what he knew, my dad directed the snow into the only other spot available, his driveway. A driveway that is almost 45 degrees down from the carport too, or so it seemed. Wicked steep either way. So the next day, the neighbor comes by to complain again. He didn't know that a small snowfall can get cars stuck in that driveway, let alone what we had plus his snowblower. His car got stuck halfway in the street and he had to get it towed out. If my dad were home, he could have saved them the tow fee, but Picard didn't know that. So Picard is fuming and saying he's going to do his own walk from now on. My dad tries to tell him he's just assisting the neighbor on the other side and he doesn't charge for being a good neighbor, etc. It's cold and my dad wants the door shut, but Picard doesn't want to step in and my dad doesn't have his shoes or coat. So Picard just says,
I know what I'm doing. I'm a grown man. I can deal with a little fluff.
The next day, my dad knocks on the neighbor's door and tries to tell Picard about how strict the city is about snow removal and how he has 24 hours from the start of snowfall to get things removed, etc. He wrote down a website where he can go to read the rules, but Picard didn't take it. The city was constantly driving down our block for reasons I won't go into here. The Picards were doing a semi-sufficient job manually shoveling snow away properly. But then, October in my state has a big teachers conference, and most families go out of town for a late camping or early hunting trip. So did the Picards. They are gone for 4 days during the worst storm of the season. They hadn't arranged to have the walk shoveled, and the snow was piling so high, city inspectors came out. Parents and neighbors complained to the city that they couldn't walk down our street. It was so obvious that the walks were being taken care of, so why not theirs? The city posted a 48-hour compliance notice, but it would be 72 before the Picards got back to town. The city charged them with hazardous conditions and failure to maintain property accessible to the public. On top of the labor fee to shovel the walk, it was like $350 easily. The city kept a watchful eye on the property for the rest of the winter for any issues from then on. Once the city has you on their radar, it's hard to be done with them. The cherry on top of the entire situation, there's a knock on the door in early November, same year. One of the Picard kids handed my sister an envelope and just walked away. We gave it to my mom, and inside there's a note saying something like, "This is for the shoveling you did already." There was a $100 bill inside. My family tried to return it, but they never answered the door. So we used it to take our large family out to our favorite buffet later that week. Thank you, Picards, for paying for a free service. We spent it well. You want me to push the pallet all the way in? Okay. Background. This happened earlier today at the grocery store that I work at. I work in the produce area, and when we are done with our boxes, we take them to the box crusher. And then when that is full, it has to be tied up and put out on a pallet to be sent back on one of the trucks we get. We call this a bale for future reference. When I went down there to crush my boxes, the machine was full, so I had to empty it. Me and a couple other coworkers finished tying up the bale, and I grabbed the electric-powered pallet jack, since it's easier to use for something as heavy as a bale, and pick up the bale to put it on the truck. Now, since this is the weekend before Thanksgiving, the store is busy as heck, and because of this, there were some grocery pallets on the truck still. Most were on the right side, but there was still one pallet on the left, the side I was putting the bale on. One of the people who helped me tie the bale, we'll call him Tim, says to put it in front of the pallet on the left and he'll deal with it later. I say okay and put it there. Now another guy, we'll call him Derek, comes up to me after I put this bale on the truck and says that I can't put it there since it's blocking the one pallet of stuff and that I need to take the bale back off, move the grocery stuff out, and then put the bale back on again. I tell him that Tim said to do it like that, and he basically says that he doesn't care and that I need to redo it. A little annoying, but whatever. I start to rearrange things to his liking while using the electric power jack. He asks if I've been certified to operate the power jack. You need to be certified to be allowed to use it. And I say in a very passive-aggressive manner, yes, I have been. Thank you. Now I move the things around and I'm putting the bale back in the truck on the left. I try to go the whole way down, but I can't. Some product on a pallet on the right is leaning over a bit, which wouldn't be an issue by itself normally, but there were pallets against the left wall of the trailer, so there was barely not enough room to go all the way back. If I try to force it, then something will fall over and be more annoying to deal with, and I know this. I think to myself, well, it's only like 2 pallet spaces to go. It should be fine where it is now. But apparently Derek didn't think that way. Him. You just gonna leave it there? Me. Yeah? Him. Don't just leave it there. Push it all the way back. Me. You want me to push it all the way back? Him, aggressively. Yes, push it back. Me. Okay. I lift the bale up, and without any regard for what will happen, I push it the rest of the way in with the power jack. The pallets on the wall get knocked down and pushed back, so now they can't get them if needed. Derek comes up to me and says, "Now see, that's what I didn't want to happen." I look at him and say, "I just did what you asked me to. You wanted me to push it in. I pushed it in." He gets visibly angry and says something that I didn't listen to because I just walked away to finish crushing my boxes. As I finish my boxes and I see him taking the bale out and stacking the pallets on top of it, he looks at me and says, "Would that have been so hard?" I say back to him, "You told me to push it in, not take it out and stack pallets on it. I did exactly what you asked me to. I don't know why you're so angry." After that, he just walks away in a clearly angry mood, and I walk back to my area grinning. Edit. Forgot to mention that I was about to tell Derek why I didn't put the bale all the way back until he told me aggressively to push it back. If he had just stayed calm, the whole thing could have been avoided. Edit 2, to add a little more context. Derek is technically above me, but in a different department, so he's kinda my boss, but not really. That's why I listen to him over Tim. Also, Tim isn't equal to me in that department, but I work with him way more often than I do with Derek, which is why I trusted his judgment to just throw the bale on the truck to begin with. Tim left the back room after he told me to put the bale on the truck, so he wasn't there to tell Derek that he'll get it, though I don't think that would have made a huge difference. Am I the jerk for kicking my husband out of my parents' house after how he reacted to my sister's pregnancy announcement? First thing I'm going to say is my sister is my best friend and supporter, and I have so much love and respect for her. My husband, 33, developed a compulsive urge to tell jokes and funny stories. He literally laughs in people's face whenever he gets the chance to act funny, though he never finds others' jokes funny and gets offended by any attempt to get him to laugh. He, more importantly, is blind since he was 11. You do not want to hear how it happened. All I'll say is that he had had a rough childhood and it's impacted his adulthood. We were at my parents' house where the family gathered as my sister requested to make an announcement. We were sitting when my sister announced she's expecting. Everyone congratulated her except my husband, who sat there and out of the blue said, "So, who's the daddy?" The room went all quiet, except for my cousin's husband, who laughed. My parents and sister were in shock. He continued, I mean, I could go ahead and start making guesses, but I'm not going to say names now, am I? Things will then get really awkward in here. Followed by an awkward laugh. Everyone was flabbergasted, and I was very upset. My sister excused herself out, and family watched as I started yelling at my husband that he was out of his mind to make such an awful comment towards my sister and humiliate her like that. He then said relax, he was just messing with her, but I told him to get up and get out. He picked an argument, saying, come on, it was no big deal, and my sister can't take a joke, and I obviously overreacted, but I loudly told him to leave immediately. He tried to get my parents involved, but I told him to leave right then. He slowly made his way out while still arguing, but I refused to let him speak. My sister had already left, and I tried to call her as my husband waited outside for someone to come pick him up. I felt horrible as my parents asked me to let him back in since it was cold outside, but he ended up leaving anyway. He tried to call, then his brother called to berate me for treating his brother like that and kicking him out like a dog, completely disrespecting him and acting so surprised because he told a silly joke. He demanded I make up for it, but I said no. My younger sister looked at me and said my husband might not have been actually joking and told me to think about what he said, then went upstairs. I didn't think much of it because I was so ashamed hiding from my parents and sister and her husband who's out of town. My husband's family are livid. ETA, a few things. My husband has always been on bad terms with my sister and lately has been focusing his jokes on her. Note, my sister is happily married to her husband of 5 years. Not the jerk, not in the slightest. I feel like I spend all my time on Reddit wondering, why the heck is she with this man? Your husband is well aware of how his jokes make people feel. That's exactly why he makes them. He took a really special moment for your sister, made himself the center of attention, and then got people to feel sorry for him. These are the actions of a cruel, bitter, insecure person. I would proceed accordingly. Look, I don't care who is the jerk or not. All I care is, what did your sister mean by her comment? Who is the father of your sister's baby? Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her husband? Please let us know.
If Mr. Comedian asked me who the father of my baby was, I'd say, unfortunately, it's probably Redder Boy.
Take away my overtime? Okay. I was offered a crap salary and promotion to a job I was already doing through increased responsibility by being a good employee with great job performance. I turned it down. I wasn't allowed to negotiate either, which I still did. Forget that rule. The counteroffer was still far less than median, which was the lowest I would go, as I did a good job. It doesn't look good when employees refuse promotions, and nearly every manager in the company knows me. I'm the supply guy after all. So they tried taking my overtime away. They had to be gunning after my pride and performance and not wanting to be fired. To note, I live a simple life and don't care for the money, but my friends in the company are in similar positions and have families and need the money. I can get another job easy enough that pays enough for me to live off of. I turned it down because it's not a lot of money to a big company and don't want to fuel mistreatment of its employees, my friends. I complied with no more overtime, but I told them I needed the overtime to do a good job. As a supply guy for a large company, I order millions of dollars of supplies throughout the year. I didn't have time to negotiate big orders anymore. HR didn't care, and my director boss didn't think I'd let my job performance drop. I started doing bare minimum with my HR-provided copy and paste job description and only 8-hour days. I sucked. I did the role above my job title to begin with, but they would never acknowledge this or they'd have to pay me for it. So now I was spending over $20,000 more a month than I used to. Boss knew, but what could he do? He messed up. I'm the only person in the company with knowledge that can only be gained through experience to do the job. I'm also critical to many operations. This is small figures to a large company, and it's not like my boss and HR would tell people they messed up in my handling. He also spent the personal budget on hiring his friend to be a director, so I heard later. So I stuck around until I had trained a replacement, since I don't want to leave on a bad note, since my great friends I made in the company are the managers I worked with daily for years. So then I left. It would be a bad story if this was all. When I left, a lot of people were curious why. My friends, nearly every manager, weren't afraid to talk as my boss wasn't their boss. Without going into detail, I'm popular in my company for lower level workers. I've saved the day a few times and do all I can to make their jobs easier. Due to other complaints with HR and poor pay, me leaving fueled their discontent further to a noticeable performance level. This prompted an unofficial investigation by other directors. Our COO was the likely core of the problem. He hired my boss, his friend, and had a say in the HR director's hiring. Other directors soon drove them out, as it's hard to like a job when your employees and coworkers hate you. The HR director still works there and causes problems, but she no longer has a say in pay levels. A few managers and good employees got raises. There's still a lack of base pay though, if you ask me. Overall, I like to think I had a key role to play, as I knew a few directors on a personal level. I'm back at college after dropping out the first time for medical reasons and still talk to my friends at the company regularly. For belief this isn't made up, since I'm not entirely detached from society, this isn't your regular big company. It grew rapidly in the last 5 years, and many directors were promoted up and still busy fighting the corporate mindset takeover from what I hear. Reply: It's so difficult to work for places like that. At my previous job, we had quarterly meetings where the VP would drag all of the employees and managers into one of the big unused areas and talk about record profits, enormous growth, all of the new clients we were bringing on, etc. Sounds great, but whenever someone would ask for a raise, it wasn't in their budget. They pulled the no overtime card on us as well, and some employees actually worked off the clock. The company ended up having to settle a class action lawsuit, which was brought forth by an employee, surrounding the unpaid overtime and lack of breaks. When I gave my notice, my boss was so surprised that I told her no one was happy there. Reply: Can relate so much to living a simple life and not needing a lot of money. I don't have a family, and I'm not really saving to buy a car or anything like that. I just need food and a roof, I guess. I'm from a developing country, and I was being offered basically the lowest possible for a recently graduated dude. I said no thanks, because I'd rather not have a job than work my butt off for pennies. After not even 2 months, I found freelance work online for an American company, and I'm doing very well. I guess people see my CV online and often call me offering the same crappy salary, thinking I'm desperate or something. I don't want to sound rude to recruiters, but how do I explain that I'm making 5 times more money for working half the hours and from home? I just say I appreciate the offer, but I'm not looking for new opportunities at the moment. After typing all of this, I realize it doesn't have much to do with the original post, but I guess it's too late now. Maybe I just wanted to complain about recruiters belittling me. Am I the jerk for admitting I don't like my brother's girlfriend? My brother, Steve, has been in a relationship with his current girlfriend, Daisy, for around 1 year. And this time, I've only met her a handful of times. My brother was previously married to a woman, Louise, for 10 years, and they have 3 kids together. I met Daisy for the first time in April this year. She seemed friendly at first, and we chatted, getting to know each other. Second time, we went out for a meal, and she was unnecessarily rude to the waitress, demanding things and not saying please or thank you. I pulled her up on it and told her to apologize, which she did. Then we moved on. Cut to June. I was sending out my wedding invites and invited Steve and Daisy, but I also invited Steve's ex-wife, Louise. I asked Steve if he had any issues with me inviting Louise, and he said none at all because they co-parent very well and very much are still friends. I've known Louise for 15 years, and just because she's now divorced my brother, I still very much see her as part of the family. A couple of weeks went by, and I get a message from Daisy. I've only met her twice at this point, asking me to uninvite Louise or she wouldn't come to the wedding. So I just replied, okay, no problem. It's your choice not to come to the wedding, but I won't be uninviting anyone. Daisy didn't like this and declined to come. Skip to the day before the wedding. Louise didn't come due to lockdown. So Steve told Daisy, and Daisy eventually came. I didn't care if she was there or not. I didn't really spend much time with her. A few weeks after the wedding, my mom organized a girls' get-together, and Daisy was invited too. This is my 4th time meeting with her at this point. There were around 10 of us, and we were having fun and having a few drinks. Daisy just starts shouting at me for being inconsiderate for inviting Louise to the wedding and not considering her feelings. I was just honest. Instead, I only met her twice before the wedding, and I didn't really know her, Daisy, and I only invited her because she's my brother's girlfriend. It also doesn't matter if Louise was invited because it was my wedding and I could choose who to invite. If I had to choose to invite Louise or her, Daisy, then I would have chosen Louise because she has been a part of my family for a long time. I didn't really speak to her since this incident, and I saw her yesterday at a family meal. Daisy asked me if I liked her, and I said, based on my interactions with her, that I didn't like her and didn't think we could get on, but happy to be civil. I just don't want a friendship with her. A few hours after the meal, I got a message from Steve asking why I didn't like her. I sent him all the messages she sent me, told him about the incident at my mom's get-together, and he said that I should give her a chance because I don't really know her. Am I the jerk for admitting to her that I don't like her? Not the jerk. Daisy shouldn't ask questions she doesn't want honest answers to. $127 dine-in dash. So I'm a server, and one of my tables walked out. This is gonna be long, but please read. I need advice. Background. The servers are supposed to pay for walkouts when they happen where I work. I've had to pay for things in the past because I messed up, and I admit they were my fault. I've worked there for 2 years now, so I'm well aware of the rule. Story time. It's getting close to the end of the night, and I had to use the bathroom. Had to go number 2, which means I was gonna be gone for a little. I say to 2 of my fellow servers, I have to use the bathroom. Can you guys please watch table F1? And they say okay. So I go to the bathroom and come back a little bit later. The assistant manager let me know I had a table. Another server got the table's drink order for me, so I'm just waiting as the assistant manager makes the drinks, and my general manager comes up to me and says F1 haven't been paid for. I notice the 2 people from the table are gone. Before I went to the bathroom, the table asked for their check, so I go to see if they left the money, but it was empty. Me. There's no money. GM. Well, you have to pay for it. Me. I don't think I should have to pay for this because I asked 2 other servers to watch my table. GM. You signed the paper, so you have to pay. You know the rules. Me. I'm sorry, but I'm not paying for it. This wasn't my fault. I walk away so I can continue to take care of my other table. Then maybe 15 minutes later, I pull my assistant manager to the side. Me. Look, I follow the rules. You guys, my managers, have always said if you step out, let someone know so they can watch your table, and that's exactly what I did. So I'm not paying for it. Assistant manager. Well, that's not fair to everyone else, and you signed the paper. Me. GM said that too, and I don't know what paper you're talking about. Assistant manager. The paper that says you have to pay for walkouts regardless of the reason. It was passed out a while ago. Me. I never signed that because I was never given one. Well, it has to be paid for. It was your table at the end of the day. It's your responsibility. Me. I was having a human bodily function. How can I be held responsible when I let others know? Well, you didn't tell me. But we can't put you on the schedule until it's paid for. Me. Well, this might be the last time we work together because I'm not paying for it. In the end, my GM gave me a speech about how I've been working there for 2 years and that I'm a good employee and I should get more trustworthy people to watch my tables. Secretly, he took some of the money off the order and told me not to tell the other servers, but I still have to pay $100 overtime like a payment plan. I just want to know if I was in the wrong for not wanting to pay it. Obviously, the other 2 servers could have been held accountable as well, but I didn't want to have my coworkers hate me. At this point, I'm just going to pay it off and work until I find a new job because this place is far from perfect, but this whole thing has completely upset me. Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard.
Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.